Hello.
Yeah.
What's up, guys? How are you?
Doing good. Hanging in there. How you doing?
Good. Good. No rest for the wicked.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you're about to have a small break with being done with the finals and everything.
Yes. Breaks are nice. Yeah. Two launches, Summit launch and Fat Loss Blueprint launch. Final the day after the launch completed. And yeah, it's a lot. I could use a break. But fortunately, I have you two. And you guys
we try.
successfully
We try.
taken a lot of work off my plate. So I'm very happy about that. Yes. Okay. So welcome, everyone. Melanie, Ann, Marilyn, Valerie, Lori, good morning. So first of all, let's just make sure you can see and hear me. I assume you can. So if not, just comment and let us know. But let's get started with Melanie's question. I've only reached up to lesson 4. Are the below questions answered in later sessions? Okay. Okay, so the first question is, if you are at a normal weight but not very lean, do you follow that line item, the middle item, for each category? I'm sorry, I'm not following some of this. Are you guys following this? Okay.
A little, not that first one. Maybe she's referring to the habits. I don't know. Melanie, can you retype your very first question in a different way?
Yeah, just Melanie, it's easier if you just provide less context about the specifics and just ask like a single question, just the question and nothing else. That's the easiest way for us to get through questions and answer them without confusion on our part. So everyone else, let's get started with some questions. What do you got for us?
Well, we got one down. Laurel really jumped in. Hi, immediately followed by her question. If you had to pick 2 of the supplements noted to assist in weight loss, what 2 would you pick? For me, I would say that really depends on where your starting point is. If it was for me personally, somebody who is already relatively lean and looking to get leaner, then I would probably go with Yohimbine, because that's as you get more and more lean, you start to see that stubborn fat deposits on your body. There's certain reasons why it's called stubborn fat, and Yohimbine has unique properties that that helps overcome the stubbornness of those fat stores. So I would take it either systemically or use a topical application directly on the site.
Especially important for women because we have more of the A2 receptors in our glute area and our thighs.
Those A2 receptors basically stop fat loss, if you want to think about it like that. They're like brakes on a car, and Yohimbine inhibits them. The other one would be forskolin, because forskolin works by amplifying cyclic AMP within cells, and this is kind of like the crossroads for all fat burning effects. When you enter into I want to break down fat tissue, it needs to happen through an increase in cyclic AMP from a physiological perspective. And so this would amplify any other supplement that increases the breakdown of fat, like caffeine. Forskolin would amplify those effects. And so forskolin and Yohimbine would be my recommendations for someone who's already probably at a normal body weight and looking to get leaner. If you're overweight or obese, then I would definitely put 5-HTP up there, because it's going to help suppress appetite. And that's usually the big, once you already get really lean, you normally have better control over your appetite and what you eat. But when you're overweight or obese, sometimes that is more difficult. And so having appetite suppression can be helpful. And then I would combine that probably with fucoxanthin, mainly because the research on fucoxanthin is highly preliminary. But what research is available suggests that it is quite an amazing supplement in the sense that it builds up. So it's a carotenoid, just like astaxanthin or beta carotene. So it's fat soluble and it builds up in your fat tissue and seems to have potent body fat reducing effects after you take it continuously for about 8 to 16 weeks. Haven't figured out why, but that's what the clinical research shows. So it's still preliminary, still need to figure out how it has these magical effects, but everything that we have right now points in a direction of being pretty powerful.
Yeah. One excellent answer, Alex. One thing I want to mention, thank you, is on yohimbine. I remember experimenting years ago with like stubborn fat loss protocols, trying to shred off the last layer of fat. And yohimbine, I might have been taking a specific version of yohimbine. I'm sort of vaguely remembering there being 2 forms of it. But it made me feel like I was on crack. I mean, it was like the most horrible feeling stimulant I have ever tried. And I did it for about 3 days and I was like, screw this. I'd rather have the fat than deal with, being like totally just strung out and like high anxiety, can't focus because I'm jittery and like totally fearful and anxious all day long.
So I take it at a half a dose and I do it before I do cardio only. So that's, I could not like just do a normal day after taking it because I would feel the same.
Yeah. And having said that, and this gets at one of the questions that's coming up, there seems to be big differences in how people respond to stimulants. And some people are highly sensitive. I happen to be highly sensitive to stimulants. I'm not super sensitive to most things. The 2 things that I can think of that I'm sensitive to are stimulants and melatonin. Whereas a lot of other people are much less sensitive. And like Alex, I think, is the extreme of non-sensitive to stimulants. And there's genetic reasons for this as far as how fast we metabolize, for example, caffeine and so on. But I did just want to mention that warning of if you're sensitive to stimulants, do be cautious with yohimbine.
Any heart conditions too.
Yeah.
But that's just general for stimulants, I think.
Mm-hmm. Christine says to me, I watched your excellent videos on the myth of adrenal fatigue and appreciate all your time on that. Now I'm confused about what is the purpose and importance of the adrenal glands. Okay, so let's first answer that. So this is not to say that the adrenal glands are not important. Cortisol is very important. There's also other hormones, epinephrine, and I believe norepinephrine also produced by the adrenals. All of these are super important and they absolutely modulate all kinds of different aspects of our response to stress. The point of these articles was not to say cortisol and epinephrine and norepinephrine are insignificant or don't matter. It's to say that the specific theory of the reason behind why people are chronically fatigued as stress exhausts, quote unquote, or burns out the adrenal glands so that you can't produce enough cortisol and that results in fatigue. That whole theory is incorrect, without a doubt. I mean, the evidence is very clear that it's not correct. It doesn't work like that. And the vast majority of people with chronic fatigue have no deficit in cortisol. So hopefully that clarifies it. Obviously, I've done 3 or 4 hours of videos and very long articles on that subject. So I'm trying to answer succinctly without getting into a million details here. Outside of the myth of adrenal fatigue and Addison's. So Addison's is not a myth, to be clear. Addison's is a real condition with a deficit of cortisol. That is a real thing. But it's very rare and it's probably less than 1% of people with fatigue, but is a real condition. So for the average person, can the adrenal glands be compromised? And if so, how? The right way to think about it is not necessarily that they can be compromised. I'm sure that's possible. I mean, Addison's is a thing, so let's get that out of the way. So you can have Addison's, but much more commonly is disruptions to, for example, circadian rhythm that lead to a disrupted or dysfunctional diurnal curve of cortisol. So you might have low levels of cortisol in the morning, high levels in the evening. That is a very real thing. And circadian rhythm disruption is the single most common cause of that. Sleep, a deficit in sleep, being a night owl chronotype, all of those things can profoundly disrupt it. I wrote a comprehensive article covering all the, I think there's like 15 different causes that are linked to disrupted rhythms of cortisol. So I recommend checking that out. Once Alex or Brianna are answering the next question, I'll provide the link to that just in the chat. Okay. Jeremy said in the circadian rhythms and sleep tracking sheet, it says reduce psychological stress and increase your activity during daylight hours. Where are these checklists found? They're somewhere in there. I don't know off the top of my head. Somewhere in the members area of the program. There's probably summary documents below the videos, and in those summary documents would be my guess. Do you guys know off the top of your head?
I'm trying to find the question because when you read it off, it didn't register in my brain.
You know, you guys had read a comment from Laurel.
It was all the way at the very bottom of the chat window. Because
yeah, it's weird. That one's not appearing in my feed, so I'm wondering if maybe there's a difference in our chat feeds for some reason.
Oh.
So can you find the comment I just said from...
that's what I'm looking for.
It's from... Where was it? Jeremy.
Oh, Jeremy. Yeah, there it is. Reduce psychological stress. Well, I would assume the checklist is in one of the added files under that section, because that's where Melinda has been putting them. So if there's a checklist for like circadian rhythms, it would be in that lesson plan. You just have to scroll down a little beneath the video itself.
Yeah, should be somewhere on there. But if you can't find any documents or files or anything that are being referenced, you can always just email support@theenergyblueprint.com. They'll figure it out for you. So Rasheen said, I haven't gotten through all the modules, just purchased. What are your thoughts on stimulants like Adderall? Alex, the stimulant master, do you want to respond to that?
Well, I wouldn't call Adderall a stimulant so much as I would like a hyperfocus agent. The way it works is by acting on dopamine receptors within the brain, and this just like how drugs really get you to be like focused on the drug itself. That's kind of what Adderall does, is it puts you in the state of hyper awareness where you're able to tune out things that you aren't specifically focused on. And this is why it's been abused by college students, because it's like a combination of multiple things that make you stay awake, stay super focused, alert, and like you're cracked out basically. But you're able to hyper focus on whatever it is you want to get done. So you could write an essay in a single night, because the way it helps your brain make connections is just greatly enhanced. But yeah, I was on it growing up, or I was on a similar compound growing up because I had ADHD, which we think was just me eating a bunch of sugar and flour in retrospect. But anyway, the point being is the compound, as far as like a nootropic goes, it's amazing, but you also it's also something that you have to be very careful experimenting with if you choose to do it, because it can have addictive tendencies in the brain, especially if you're trying. Yeah, especially. Yeah, so addictive tendencies, because it's going to give you a huge dopamine surge, and it's going to mimic dopamine in the brain. And so if you stop using it, it's going to be as if suddenly you have a huge withdrawal of dopamine, and then you're going to be seeking it back out to fix that. That's how most addictive drugs work. And the other thing is, I mean, if you're using it regularly, it's definitely going to interfere with your sleep hardcore, and that's going to have long-term repercussions. Even if you feel awake, your body isn't getting, as one example, melatonin. And so that's just going to have devastating health consequences. It's something, if you need something like that, then I mean, you can give it a shot. It's a personal choice, but if there's no reason for you to use it, then I would find alternative means to work with your schedule so that you can get most of your work done during the day.
Nice. Okay. T said, caffeine bad, but green tea / matcha is okay. Okay. So there's a lot of nuances to this answer. I'm going to try and answer succinctly. I just linked to an article that I've written that's very comprehensive, sort of breakdown of all the different neurotransmitter aspects of what caffeine does in the brain, and with a focus on energy levels. Okay, so one of the things that I've talked about in the past is how daily caffeine consumption basically causes negative neurotransmitter adaptations in your brain over time. And specifically, the way that caffeine works is it plugs up adenosine receptors in your brain. Adenosine is a neurotransmitter in your brain that normally sort of makes you feel fatigued or sleepy. So by plugging that up, caffeine has a stimulant effect. Okay, it has an energizing effect by blocking the thing that would normally make you feel fatigued or tired. So the problem is with this is the body basically responds to this by going, hey, the balance of neurochemicals in the brain that regulate our sort of level of wakefulness or tiredness has been disrupted and is being chronically disrupted. We need to bring things back into balance. So it does a couple things. One, it makes more adenosine receptors to sensitize the brain to adenosine, and it makes more adenosine. So what that does is, if this is your normal level of energy and mood and cognitive function, it brings that down. Okay. So when you're not on the caffeine. And so this is why people who are addicted to coffee or caffeine wake up every morning, they're groggy, they're in a bad mood, they have a hard time getting out of bed, they're low energy, and then they need the coffee in order to turn their brain on. So they're like zombies until that coffee hits their system. It's because of those negative neurotransmitter adaptations that I just described. Okay, so that aspect of things is obviously a big potential negative and something most people would like to avoid. Having said that, there's also a whole bunch of research, for example, on coffee consumption, that it's linked with lower risk of a variety of different diseases. There's also research specifically on caffeine, whether in the form of coffee or just caffeine, linking that to numerous different beneficial effects, for example, enhanced exercise performance and cognitive performance and so on. Most of those things are short-term and they disappear with chronic daily use, but those things absolutely do exist when you use short-term, caffeine. Okay, so that's the context. So if the short answer from that point is caffeine is not inherently bad, but daily chronic use over the long term carries those negative adaptations. If not used in that context, if used occasionally, then you can get the benefits without the negative neurotransmitter adaptations. Also be aware there's some individual differences, as I got kind of alluded to earlier. Like Alex is totally insensitive to caffeine. I'm very sensitive to caffeine. There's also seems to be some differences between, for example, coffee versus matcha. So I drink coffee. Coffee makes me jittery. I drink matcha. Matcha makes me feel good and with no jitters, despite both of them having caffeine. So there seems to be individual differences in the specific compounds and so on. And then there's the long-term versus short-term. So hopefully I answered what is a big topic fairly succinctly there. Do you guys have anything to add to that?
Not really. No, I think you answered it great. I would add, I guess the one thing I would add too is that outside of caffeine, if you're looking at natural sources of it, like coffee or green tea, they're going to have other bioactives in them that have been associated with health benefits, like chlorogenic acid from coffee and catechins in the green tea. Mm-hmm. So I would argue that probably the worst case scenario is just using like caffeine pills. If you're
any amount of caffeine from like isolated sources at all.
Yeah. So
Coffee doesn't affect me.
So coffee or green tea are going to have benefits from other compounds that are in them. So, and some of the benefits are directly attributable to caffeine. Intermittently, like Ari mentioned, but the long-term benefits from, for example, coffee consumption have been found to occur with decaffeinated coffee as well. And so for coffee, I mean, if you want to have some regular coffee, every now and then, great. But if it's something you want to consume regularly, try to opt for the decaf version, because then you're not screwing with your energy levels, but you're still getting all these other amazing compounds.
Yeah, well said. Jeremy said in the already answered that one. You're welcome, Georgia. Thank you. Rebecca, any thoughts on Dr. Klinghardt opinion that melatonin should be liposomal to be effective? So I think he's just totally wrong on this. My thoughts on melatonin are that melatonin is plenty bioavailable, and the reason to use liposomal is if something is not highly bioavailable. So like there's an argument, for example, for liposomal vitamin C, for example, because there's some limitations on how much can be absorbed at once. You could probably reach higher levels using liposomal. There's an argument for liposomal CBD because oral CBD is very poorly bioavailable. So liposomal is going to increase that greatly. But something like melatonin makes absolutely no sense to me, because even if it was, let's say, 50% bioavailable, like instead of 100%, let's say it was 30% bioavailable, then instead of using, like, for example, for me, I use like 200, 300 micrograms a night. Okay. So and that's a small dose, but the same applies at bigger doses. If I said, oh, I thought I was absorbing all 300 of those micrograms, but now I just found out that melatonin only has 30% bioavailability. So, okay, what would I do? I just go increase the dose to 900 milligrams, problem solved. So that's my thoughts on it. I think it makes no sense, and I haven't seen any science to support the necessity of doing that. But Alex also and Brianna have a lot of expertise in melatonin research. So you guys tell me if you agree with me or disagree.
Yeah, I agree for 2 points. The first is that from a mechanistic perspective, melatonin structure allows it to easily be soluble in both water and fat. And so it's one of the few compounds in the body that can actually just passively diffuse through cell membranes, through the cell, through water structures like the blood. It has no issues doing that. It can literally reach every corner of your body because of its structure. And that's one of the reasons why it's one of the most potent antioxidants, is because it can go everywhere. And then the other one is just based on clinical research. Who cares what the bioavailability difference is when all of the research out there is just used regular melatonin and they've shown health benefits? Like if a study uses 6 milligrams of melatonin and they show it reduces oxidative stress, but it was only 50% bioavailable, why does that matter? Just take 6 milligrams of the less bioavailable. I mean, the supplement's not expensive.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly my thinking as well. Roisin, to explain, been prescribed Adderall for the last 20 years and feel it's helped control appetite plus get me to exercise, but my HRV, heart rate variability, is really low, and I'm worried about long-term effects. Yeah, I mean, I think Alex knows quite a bit more about Adderall than I do, but I definitely would be worried about long-term effects from years or decades of using it. Do you have any specific thoughts on that?
Well, I would just want to really introspect and ask, why have you been prescribed Adderall? Is it because of ADD or ADHD? Those conditions do exist, but not for most people. It's very overly diagnosed, and it's due to, there's actually clinical studies on this with things like yellow food dye, for example, has been shown to exacerbate ADD and ADHD. And so that's a common cause of overdiagnosis, is because kids, which is when you're often diagnosed, are just eating a bad diet. Like myself, I was diagnosed with ADHD. I do not meet the diagnosis criteria. I didn't meet the diagnosis criteria in high school, as soon as I was eating a different diet. So I would ask, why are you prescribed Adderall? I would probably, frankly, I would probably try to wean yourself off of it. They're a compound like Adderall, but that has less potency, which would be a good stepping stone, is ephedrine. Don't take them together, but as something to wean yourself off of, because you can't just quit cold turkey on this or you're going to feel like crap. Ephedrine was something that was used as a fat burner because it has a similar structure as Adderall. They're both in the same classification of amphetamines, but it's less potent. You can buy it. It's been banned in dietary supplements, but you can purchase it over the counter in Broncaid, which is an asthma medication. And then after ephedrine, I would just stop. Like once you feel comfortable with ephedrine and you don't feel weird from coming off Adderall, then just stop the ephedrine altogether, because that's kind of like the last step before you can be on the floor again. But yeah, I definitely wouldn't be on Adderall long term at all because of the changes it does to brain structure and function. And I mean, especially the heart. Amphetamines are stimulants. That's the whole reason ephedrine, which is less potent than Adderall, was taken off the market, is because long-term use can cause heart problems.
Yeah.
And that, it actually, I'm not trying to scare you, but it does line up with your really low HRV. So I think it's something that you should address.
Yeah. In tandem with everything Alex just said, I would also say maybe consider getting on some herbs that support brain-derived neurotrophic factors, support neurotransmitter balance in the brain. So things like lion's mane mushroom, neurofactor coffee fruit extract, not coffee bean, coffee fruit extract,
Ultra Brain.
Yeah, Ultra Brain. So yeah, shameless plug. We have a new supplement that's coming out. It's literally shipping to the shipping and fulfillment house right now after 6 months of working on it. So it might be available by the end of next week. And using a brain formula like that in tandem with maybe a stimulant like ephedrine, just in the wean off process, would likely help tremendously in minimizing the neurotransmitter imbalances that you'd get weaning off, and minimizing the decrease in brain function that you're going to have weaning off after years of Adderall use. Were you going to say something? You look like you wanted to say.
No.
But I do want to follow up real quick on that. Yeah, this is kind of a shameless plug, but it's also relevant with Ultra Brain. A lot of the compounds in it are at clinically effective doses for managing both anxiety and depression, so mood disorders. And the reason that they do that is primarily because they help balance either the over or under synthesis of neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine. And so it is directly relevant to when you're coming off an amphetamine, which completely screws up dopamine signaling, that you're going to have compounds in there that help reestablish balance, because dopamine and serotonin signaling are two of the primary reasons why mood disorders like depression and anxiety exist.
Yeah, well said. Okay, Laurel, you're welcome. Or maybe Alex should say you're welcome. I think he's the one that answered.
Thank you.
And said 5-HTP warning. If you're diagnosed bipolar, find yourself getting lots of energy and maybe irritability, and get off the 5-HTP. It can trigger mania. Interesting. Thank you for that. Oh, sorry, Brianna, go ahead.
Yeah, well, it could, but usually mania is caused from excess dopamine, and 5-HTP doesn't affect dopamine. So it affects serotonin. So maybe it could be messing with something else and causing a mania, but usually it's not from like bipolar mania. That's dopamine excess.
Mm-hmm. Well, actually, you just reminded me. Sorry, there was one thing I meant to add on the Adderall thing. Just a real quick aside of another tool to look into. When I was a kid, my older brother was diagnosed with ADHD and was prescribed either Adderall or Ritalin. My parents refused to put him on it, and instead they put him in neurofeedback. And this was like the early 1990s, mid 1990s maybe. Which at that time, neurofeedback was almost unknown. It was considered quackery and pseudoscience. And even though I wasn't diagnosed with ADHD, my parents actually decided to throw me in there as well. They had my brother going, why not? Also put me in there. And I really do think neurofeedback is an amazing tool, and I would consider looking into that as well if you're struggling with ADHD. So just wanted to mention that as well. Tosh, do you have any suggestions for migraines that start with perimenopause and continue to get worse after menopause? Currently on HRT and getting Botox to manage the pain. Brianna, do you have expertise in this?
Yeah, so usually it's caused from high estrogen or high progesterone. So I don't know your personal hormone levels if you're on HRT, but you might be in excess if you're still having the migraines. And if the Botox is helping, it's usually from tension issues and like jaw clenching. I don't know if that's your situation, but if you could clarify, I could help more.
Yeah, there's also like tension headaches that someone would get from sitting at a computer, you know, and excessive tightness here. I would definitely consider looking into, you know, a stand-up desk or a treadmill desk and posture correction if you're having tons of tension back there.
I'll add 2 things to that. One of them is benfotiamine in very high doses of, I want to say like 300 to 500 milligrams. It's a special form of thiamine, vitamin B1, that's been shown to help with migraines in general. And so has high dose riboflavin, which is vitamin B2, again at doses of like 300 to 500 milligrams. There's no risk of toxicity with these compounds, but those 2 for migraines in general have been shown to have benefits. And for migraines associated with PMS, which might be relevant to your situation, vitamin B6 of 50 to 100 milligrams per day. Take the P5P form, and what's it called? Vitex Agnes Cactus Chasteberry, I guess is the easier name.
And the rescue.
Yeah, but
scientific name, Chasteberry.
Yeah. Do you remember what the dose for that one is off the top of your head?
I think it's 600 milligrams, but I'm not.
Let's say 400 to 600 milligrams. That sounds about right from memory.
Yeah. A couple other herbs to add to that: feverfew and butterbur also, and magnesium also useful in migraines. But if you're specifically noticing it around with the hormones, I think Brianna might have zeroed in on the main cause of, you know, probably estrogen dominance, most likely, maybe progesterone.
And then supporting liver health if that is the case, because you need to be able to detoxify that estrogen.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Christine, how much water a day is ideal? You hear different things. Half of your body weight in ounces. What should we strive for? And if feeling constipated with changes of added protein. Okay, so 2 questions there. So first, water. Alex could probably give you some specific guidelines, but what I would say is just understand that context matters in a big way. If you're a marathon runner in Arizona, who's doing 3 hours of activity in outdoors in 100-degree heat, you're going to be sweating a huge amount. Your water needs are going to be way higher than somebody who's a sedentary desk job worker in an air-conditioned office. So understand that, you know, immediately just knowing that and nothing else, any specific formula of here's how many ounces you should consume based on your body weight is going to be, if not totally wrong, at least greatly limited for a large number of people. The best way that I recommend judging it is by your urine color. And you can use, like, basically you want to shoot for not totally completely clear, but you want to shoot for like almost clear or just, you know, a slight tinge of orange. And if you're reaching that, that's the appropriate amount of water that you should be consuming. If it's really dark orange, that's a good indication you're not consuming enough water. If it's super clear, that might mean that you're one of these people that's chugging 3 gallons a day of water and you're over consuming water. So you want to find that sweet spot. And again, it's relevant to your physical activity and outdoor time and the location you live. Do you guys have any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, the reason why you don't want to overconsume water is it dilutes electrolytes and minerals and it slows your metabolic rate. So it'll don't drink like 2 gallons of water like the bodybuilders tell you, because it actually slows your metabolic rate. You do need more water when you're drinking protein, but usually your thirst goes up to compensate for that.
Yeah, I'll add just to expand the 2 reliable indicators. So first of all, the idea that you should drink like 8 glasses of water per day has no validity in the scientific research. It's actually been clinically tested, and it doesn't relate to how much water someone needs at all. It's just a random number. It's like me telling you, hey, you should go walk 6,000 steps per day. It's not going to work for everyone. Some people might need more, some people less, or it's just a random number. Urine color, like Ari mentioned, is usually pretty reliable. And thirst for everyone except for older adults. Older adults start to have some issues with their internal ability to regulate water intake, so their thirst doesn't always match up to their requirements. But for younger adults and middle-aged adults, it seems to be pretty reliable.
Nice. Okay. Wow, man, between the 3 of us, we have a very comprehensive knowledge of a lot of these topics. You guys fill in pieces that I miss, and this is good stuff. Melanie, on the fundamental spreadsheet for lesson 2, if your normal weight in the middle line item on that sheet, then do you follow the middle line suggestions for each category on that sheet? Without having the specific thing in front of me, it's hard for me to answer this, but do you guys know?
Well,
it sounds like that's right. I mean, just middle line corresponds to middle line, but
I'm actually logged in, so hold on.
Okay, well, I'll answer another question in the meantime. We'll come back.
Are you talking? Maybe she can mention. Is she asking about the Fat Loss Fundamentals Progress Tracker?
Fundamental spreadsheet for lesson 2.
It looks. I mean, I just see a checklist. It's not a spreadsheet, so I'm not quite sure.
Okay, maybe you can clarify that, Melanie. We'll scroll up to the top of the chat to get your clarification. I'll answer just one question in the meantime here. Also for Melanie, are whole grains and Ezekiel bread acceptable? Where is the category for them? Okay, so first, yes, assuming that you are consuming grains, something like a sprouted whole grain bread like Ezekiel is probably the most optimal choice for a bread. Also sourdough is definitely a good choice.
Is that the name?
As far as the category for them, Alex, do you want to answer that?
They're a starch. They're a starchy source of carbohydrate. So if we're sticking within the context of the fat loss blueprint, if you're going to be eating bread, then if you are having like one slice, that would probably be great for a high fat meal. It wouldn't like interfere with anything. However, if you're having multiple slices of bread, you would generally want that meal to be lower in fat. I'll also add that if you're able to get it, the Garden of Life brand for their Ezekiel bread is probably the best option, because they don't use flour. They actually use whole grain, whole grains in their thing without turning them into a flour before they bake the bread. So it's going to be a lot more firm and kind of rugged texture, but it's also going to be a lot healthier for you.
Nice. Okay. I don't see. Okay. Melanie saying, forget the first question. We can move on. Okay. I'm actually lost. I scrolled up too far and now I can't find where we were.
We have a bunch from Melanie when she.
Okay, go for it.
Okay. Is extra virgin olive oil, sesame oil, and coconut oil in very small quantities acceptable? Yeah, I mean, if they fit within your if you consume them and you're able to consume them without stalling out your weight loss or anything, then yeah, they're fine. The big thing with added oils is that they're rich in calories. They're like very small quantities. So it's very easy to get a lot of calories unknowingly on them, especially if you don't measure. Like if you just drizzle olive oil, you could very well be adding 100 to 200 calories without even thinking that you are. And the other reason is that they're very low in nutritional value outside of supplying fat, and in the case of olive oil, some phytochemicals. But when you're working with very low calories, those things generally make added oils unadvisable, just because you don't want to crowd out more nutrient dense food sources for the added oils. But yeah, if they work for you, then they are perfectly fine.
Nice. Next question is a very small amount of stevia acceptable, like a dash or a pinch? Yeah, absolutely. I would even say a much larger amount of stevia is also acceptable.
I just want to clarify, to use stevia extract, like the Riboside A is commonly what's called. Stevia leaf, even though you can find stevia leaf powders that are sold in more like health focused shops, usually in bulk, it's commonly a green powder. Those are not FDA approved safe for use as a food additive, for the specific reason that it interferes with hormones, especially testosterone. And so, but the extract does not. So I just, even though there is this idea of like getting the more natural forms are healthier, in the case of stevia, almost every adverse effect that's been reported is due to using a whole leaf powder rather than an extract.
Let's just, so yes, and let's also just not scare people too much, because in general, stevia is very safe and even has some health benefits associated with it.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. Okay, Melanie, are nut butters, nut cheeses, hummus, and cacao and nuts in general acceptable? I would say, as in general, yes, on all of the above.
Yeah, same thing. They're fine, but again, very calorie dense food. So just be mindful of how much you eat when the goal is fat loss.
I am a big fan of all of those things.
Oh, I know. They're amazing.
Melanie, how do you consume less daily calories than you expend if you don't know what you expend daily? You want to mention this? We answered this in the last Q&A call, but the quick answer is basically figure out how much you're consuming, track your calories for a few days or a week or so to figure out how many calories you're consuming. And if you're weight stable, then that gives you an indication of how much you're expending.
Yep.
Margaret, I'm a vegan and I use protein powders, but I'm wondering if there are concerns about arsenic in the rice protein powders. I've heard that there are concerns about arsenic in rice. So if you can find one that has third-party lab analysis looking at arsenic, and you can actually look at the brands that are, you can find the amount of arsenic in the different brands of rice protein powders. I haven't done this in probably 2 years, but I did it about 2 years ago. And trying to remember the brand of rice protein that I buy, but I think I want to say Nutrabiotic is the brand. And I remember looking at third-party lab data showing very low amount of arsenic in that. So that would be the best guide there, because arsenic levels do vary pretty widely between different products. Peggy, do some of your suggestions for fat loss have a bigger impact than others? I'll stop and answer that immediately. Yes, unquestionably. Yeah, certain things absolutely matter and will have a bigger, more noticeable impact than others. That's absolutely unquestionable. For example, does increasing protein have the same fat loss effect as jumping in an ice bath? No. So not everything's equal, and also not everything might be equally beneficial for different individuals. So for someone who, for example, is a vegan who normally consumes like 35 grams of protein per day and has been for several years, bumping that up to 130 grams of protein per day might have an enormous impact for them. For someone else who's currently eating like 105 grams of protein, bumping it up to, let's say, 130 might not make a big difference for them. And maybe in that case, cold thermogenesis would be the bigger factor. So differs between individuals. And also, is increasing protein 2 or maybe 5 or more times more effective than ice water bath? At a certain point, you're going to reach sort of the peak of the benefits of protein, like where adding more and more and more doesn't necessarily create more and more benefits. It maxes out at a certain level, and that level, I don't know, might be 2 or maybe 3 times, and then probably going up from there probably has minimal further added benefit. Do you guys have any thoughts on this?
I just want to add one related thought, which is that I would say that the two fundamentals of not necessarily fat loss, but of achieving the body composition that you want is going to be ensuring an adequate intake of protein. This doesn't mean it needs to be excessive, just means it needs to be adequate. And then doing some form of progressive overload resistance training. And I say that because there are numerous things that you can do to lose fat. But there are a far more limited scope of things that you can do to build metabolically active, healthy muscle tissue. And I think that most people listening would agree that the goal is not necessarily to get skinny. To take this to an extreme, would everyone listening, do you want to look like someone that is suffering with anorexia nervosa because they have fat loss down like a champ? No. You probably want to look more like someone that is a model or a fitness model, or even just like, a healthy, active mom. And that's going to require having a good foundation of muscle tissue. So, and that's one of the things with this program is that the idea, even though we talk about fat loss, the thing isn't designed to maximize fat loss per se. It's designed to maximize fat loss while minimizing any loss of muscle mass and while also helping you develop muscle mass.
Mm-hmm. I would like to look like a late 1970s Arnold Schwarzenegger. I think I need more steroids though.
Yeah, probably. You could get there though. 600 milligrams.
Yeah. Peggy, do some of your suggestions for fat loss have already answered that one? Ruth, what are your thoughts on lipodema, please, and the idea that this bad fat cannot be lost via diet and exercise? I don't have much knowledge on this, but I feel like Brianna probably does.
Well, I would, as you lose fat, yeah, it's going to show up on it's usually on the bottom half, like your legs. It'll decrease in visibility as you lose fat. That's going to happen as you get lean. But I would support your lymphatic system by doing lymphatic massages. Azaic herbal blend is one of my favorite ones for lymphatic drainage. Rebounding could work. I would do that while you're losing fat to minimize the appearance.
Nice. Okay, Melanie, is pressure cooking, steaming in the microwave, and mild sautéing with 1 teaspoon of extra virgin olive oil and low sodium veggie broth acceptable? I would say yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah. 1 tablespoon of olive oil, I think, if that's what the big T stands for. If it's a teaspoon, sure. If it's a tablespoon, if you're a small woman, you may be eating, 1,200, 1,400 calories to lose fat mass, or possibly even less if you aren't very active. 1 tablespoon of olive oil is 120 calories, and that could very well stall you and just prevent your fat loss. So, like I said earlier, with added oils, you need to be mindful, and it's generally a good idea to minimize their use, especially if you're a small woman who is not very active, just because your daily calorie requirements are going to be low.
Mm-hmm. Patty, do you believe some protein types / sources are superior for muscle gain, fat loss, and health? Red meat, poultry, seafood, broth, and collagen, dairy, seeds, beans, nuts, algae. Okay, so both, I think all 3 of us, maybe Alex more so than any of us, has a lot of expertise on this. One thing I will say, just to make this a relatively succinct answer without getting too much into a massive and probably somewhat controversial discussion, let's leave health out of it. So as soon as you get into the health discussion, there's all kinds of competing claims. For example, is red meat bad or good for you, and so on. And lots of different experts, the vegans versus the low carbers versus the carnivore people and the keto people have very massive disagreements on that as far as health effects and relevance to disease. So let's leave that out. Let's just focus on muscle gain and fat loss. And Alex, do you want to just talk about kind of amino acid profiles?
Yeah. So I'm going to start by saying this. Collagen is the only protein in existence that cannot support life. It has a biological value of 0 because it contains 0 tryptophan, which is an essential amino acid. If you give someone collagen as the only source of protein in their diet, they will die. They will starve and waste away until they die because they cannot synthesize proteins due to the lack of tryptophan.
This is worth mentioning. Like, I've literally had a couple people that I've seen who have been so convinced over the last few years of people marketing collagen. And to be clear, and I know you're going to get this, collagen is not bad, and supplementing with other protein sources is great. But I've seen some people who have been so convinced with like collagen is the best, most amazing protein ever, that it's like their main protein source in their diet. That's like their protein powder they use is collagen. They have collagen protein bars, and it's like 70% of the protein that they eat is now collagen because they think it's the best. And I've seen people make that mistake. So it's just worth emphasizing the importance of what Alex just said there.
Yeah. And like Ari prefaced it with, collagen is amazing. Like it's the only protein that stimulates collagen synthesis in the body, and especially in the skin, in your joint tissue, and in your bones. The stuff's amazing. It's just not a primary protein source. It's a supplemental protein source. I like to think of it like, let's say you have a jar, and this jar is how much protein you need to eat every day. You put rocks into the jar, and those are your main sources of protein, be it from plants or animals. Those rocks are your complete protein. But then you have little gaps between the rocks, so then you pour sand over all those rocks, and that sand is the collagen that fills in the gaps. That's how I like to think about it. Mm-hmm. So that being said, if we're looking at plant versus animal protein, there is an undisputable fact that animal protein is more bioavailable. Greater than 90% of that protein is available for the body to use, compared to 60 to 80% of the protein in plants. And this issue can be easily overcome by just consuming more protein from plants. But then you run into the issue of having a huge calorie intake, because if you think about all of the plant foods that are good sources of protein, like beans and legumes, they also come with a lot of carbohydrate usually. And so it's, from a practical stand, even though it's theoretically possible to get ample protein from whole food plants, you run into a practical barrier because you would have to eat a ton of calories to do that. Not to mention food volume and the fiber that would just cause discomfort for many people. This is one of the primary reasons why in this program I recommend that if you follow a vegan diet, that's great. That's amazing for health. You just need to supplement with protein powders, because protein powders overcome both issues. First, protein powders are just protein. So you don't have the volume issue. They're easy to consume without causing a bunch of bloating or a high calorie intake. Second, plant protein powders, because of the processing involved with all the fiber removed and most of the what are considered anti-nutrients in plants removed, the protein becomes highly bioavailable, similar to animal protein. So plant protein powders are great. And when you look at studies comparing animal protein powders like whey to plant protein powders like pea, soy, or even rice, you find that there's only a difference when it's a very small amount of protein. But once you get into like what would be considered a suitable amount of protein, like 20 to 30 grams, then the differences really disappear, because you pass any threshold where you need to have a more appropriate essential amino acid profile that you would find in meats. Yeah.
Nice. I think that's excellent. Okay. Melanie, no worries. We're happy to get lots of questions. She's apologizing for inundating us with so many questions. we like it. You're welcome to do that. Ask away. Rebecca said, was it said that most portable tent saunas aren't good? Yeah, in general, that's my take on it. I haven't seen any portable tent sauna that I'm really impressed with. There might be some tent sauna out there that's decent, but in general, I would save up your money for a more proper sauna, a wooden sauna, or if, maybe a Sunlight and Solo if you're short on space. Soraya, what causes cortisol awakening response to be low, and what can you recommend to increase it? So check out the article that I posted somewhere in this feed. I'll repost it now. 1 second. And, again, circadian rhythm disruption is the single biggest cause of that, being a night owl chronotype. So, for example, there's 3, if not maybe 4 or 5 studies even, just looking at chronotype, just this one factor alone of chronotype. And this is whether you're more of a night owl or a morning person. And just to be clear, we're talking about normal, healthy people. We're not even talking about people with any kind of symptoms, any fatigue or complaining of any problem. If you just take people who go to bed at 1 a.m. and compare them to people who go to bed at 10 p.m., and you look at their morning cortisol awakening response, you will find literally that night owls have about half of the morning cortisol levels as morning types have. To the degree that if those people were getting their cortisol measured and seeing, for example, an alternative medicine practitioner or chiropractor or naturopath or something like that who believes in adrenal fatigue, they would immediately look at those numbers and say, oh my gosh, you're totally burned out from all the chronic stress, and your adrenals are not producing enough cortisol. You have adrenal fatigue. Okay, when all that is actually going on is the typical normal cortisol curve for someone who is a night owl. Now, there's one other layer to the story that's important to understand so that we don't necessarily normalize this, which is there's a study that I really like. It's sort of a one-of-a-kind study, but it's a really amazing study in terms of the insight it gives us. And it's, in a way, a really kind of primitive, crude study. Basically, they took a bunch of self-proclaimed night owls and said, go on a camping trip and no artificial light sources, be out in nature, sleep in a tent. And literally within a few days, what they found is a lot of these people who were normally going to bed at 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. and waking up at, 10 a.m., 11 a.m., without prompting, without telling them anything to do, without, any encouragement, all of a sudden they started going to bed at 10 p.m. and waking up at 6 a.m. Right. And these are all people who swore that they were night owls and that they've always been night owls and so on. And so almost every single person within a few days shifted their bedtime and wake time by 2 or 3 hours earlier. So so I'm giving you 2 layers to understand this in the context of this piece of the puzzle, chronotype and circadian rhythm disruption, and how that affects morning cortisol curves. So on the one hand, we can say night owls normally have massive declines in cortisol levels. And we can also say most people who think they're night owls are not actually night owls. It's just a function of living in a modern man-made artificially lit world. So, but anyway, I think those are the circadian rhythm and the night owl piece are probably the 2 most common reasons for why somebody has low morning cortisol levels. There's other potential reasons, for example, toxicants, mold exposure, really serious chronic inflammation, chronic infections, things like that can potentially play a role. Stress can potentially play a role. So there's a number of other potential factors. There's also like PTSD has been linked with low morning cortisol levels, lower, I should say, and even generationally. So people born to, for example, mothers who have past trauma will have lower on average morning cortisol levels. So there's some genetic or epigenetic influences there. But yeah, circadian rhythm, chronotype are the biggies. And I think for most people, correcting those will correct the cortisol curve. Do you guys have anything to add on that?
Well, I think that you're right that that's most of people's problem, but a lot of people have low T3 too, and that will cause diminished cortisol in the morning. The CT3 method, the guy that wrote those books are great, and it has tons of research in it too. If you want to check that out and you're not a night owl, that would be my next go-to.
Nice. Okay, I'm just trying to find where we are. Here we go. Okay, Pamela, I've been increasing my protein this week, feeling really full. I did get some collagen powder to help. Do I need to worry about the fats? I followed BLE for 4.5 years, never quite making down to goal weight without stalling weight loss. Working out daily, which with each body bar and now 21-day real time. Do I need to worry about the fat, or where should my fats be? I'm 5'5" and 164 pounds, would like to get to 140. So I'm not quite following where you're like, it sounds like there's a question about dietary fats that you're wondering about. Do you guys follow this?
Well, it could be going in a bunch of different ways. I'm going to assume she's wondering if because we spent, or at least I mentioned several times about monitoring like the added oil intake when you're a small woman. So I'm going to assume that she's asking if she's worried about either being too low fat or eating too much fat. Mm-hmm.
Maybe we can have her clarify just so.
Yeah, Pamela. Yeah, if you could clarify.
So Pamela, yeah, what are you asking specifically about the fats? Are you asking, should you worry about consuming too much dietary fat? Are you saying, are you worried about consuming too much fat? Just clarify your question there, and we'll scroll up and try and answer that in the next minute or two after answering one or two other questions. Nadia said, should we measure our food protein cooked or uncooked? 4 ounces cooked chicken is different to uncooked. You guys want to answer that?
Yeah, well, it depends on how lean you want to get to. Like if I have a competitor or if I'm dieting for like photo shoot or something, I weigh it raw weight always, because the moisture, different cooking methods, the moisture evaporates differently. So it's not as accurate if you weigh it cooked. But if you're just going for a healthy body composition, I don't see the point in going through all that trouble.
Yeah, it's going to be such a minor difference where it matters when you're trying to get really lean. But if you're just trying to get down to a normal body weight, then just go with convenience. Because the other factor that you can't overlook is how much stress would, trying to be more anal about your diet cause. We want to avoid that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's see if we can scroll up and. Okay. Pamela says worried about too much fat. Okay. Do you want to take that, Alex? Just
yeah. So I would say you just said you've been increasing your protein intake and you're feeling really full. So I would ride that satiety. I would hit your protein, get a lot of non-starchy fibrous vegetables to follow up your protein so that you get a nice diversity of nutrients, and take advantage of it to lose fat.
She added one more layer to the question. When I increased my protein, my fat intake raised a lot. Should I count the fats? I use avocado oil spray. Just notice my fat levels are about 100 grams per day.
Yeah. So the first thought when you say that is, what are your sources of protein? I would definitely, if you can clarify that, maybe we can throw out some alternatives, but the goal is to use lean sources of protein. So like if you're having just as one example, a big fatty cut of ribeye for a protein that's supplying 60 grams of fat, then I would say, maybe opt for a sirloin or something off the round, which are only going to provide you with 5 to 10. And especially if the fat is coming alongside animal products, the fat from animal foods is generally going to be just a waste of calories, because at least fat from plant sources is contained within a nutrient dense matrix. There aren't nutrients in animal fat. The nutrients are in the animal meat. But with plants, nuts, seeds, fatty fruits like avocados, olives, that fat comes with a bunch of nutrients. So yeah, just depending on what sources you're eating, try to opt for leaner sources. If you want to provide more context in the group, the Facebook group, then we can help you out there too.
Nice. I see a quick question here as I'm at the top from Rebecca that I'll answer. She said, does the Qi shield or the Qi shield from Germany, Paul Baratiero, prevent radiation damage? So I refer to, I assume she's referring to some kind of pendant or something like that that you wear that's supposed to protect you from EMFs. All that stuff is nonsense. Just as a universal rule across the board, all of these different pendants and bracelets and, you know, stickers that you stick to your phone and things like that, they're all pretty much universally total nonsense and pseudoscience. There are EMF blocking cases that you can get for your cell phone, or like a pad that you put on your lap that blocks EMFs from your laptop. But even these things are not perfect. Some of those don't even work when they're actually put to the test. There's a few good ones on the market. But even there's still some problems where there's like EMFs that sort of leak out the sides, and, you know, from one angle you measure it, it's like 0 EMFs. From the other angle, it's a lot. So you still have some problems. The best guarantee to protect yourself against EMFs is always distance from devices, whether it's your laptop or your phone or whatever. So like if you're talking on your phone, instead of holding it near your head, at the very least, put it like on speakerphone, hold it in your hand, away from your body, or if you can, set it on a table next to you and just speak while it's on speakerphone. So any kind of, you know, same with your laptop, get things away from you. That's the best way of dealing with EMFs, and don't waste your money on any of these, you know, quackery of these different pendants and stickers and all this kind of stuff. Okay. Where are we? Do you guys want to take
Christine? Yeah, down at Christine. Thank you for the clarification on adrenal fatigue. Very helpful, Ari. In addition to improving circadian rhythms, how can we optimize our adrenal gland function, especially for women with hormone production transitioning from the ovaries to the adrenal glands, which happens as they transition through menopause?
So, you know, first of all, as far as general adrenal gland support, there are certain cofactors for cortisol production, you know, things like B vitamins, vitamin C, and so on. So basically adequate nutrition and circadian rhythm and sleep are huge factors. Psychological stress is a huge factor of especially easing psychological stress in the evening period. So the diurnal curve of cortisol is like this. So there's a big spike in the morning for a couple hours, a few hours, and then it declines in the middle of the day, and in the afternoon declines and declines and declines in the evening and night. So the more that you can amplify that decline in the evening and night, the better. I shouldn't say amplify. The more you can improve that normal decline in cortisol levels as you get into the evening and shift into the nighttime, into sleep time, the better. So any sort of de-stressing activities that you can engage in at nighttime, so whether it's sort of meditation, prayer, yoga, breathing practices, massage or self-massage, foam rolling, listening to calming music, journaling, you know, reading sort of spiritual books, as opposed to like watching action movies or anything that's really stimulating, or doing work late at night. Like, give yourself that buffer to allow your body to wind down into sleep mode and like get into full relaxation mode. Okay. So having that period of time is really critical. There are other factors that relate to the diurnal curve beyond circadian rhythm, beyond chronotype, beyond stress. So for example, excess body fat actually has been linked to this as well. So the loss of body fat, generally speaking, also will improve the diurnal curve of cortisol. What else? Being sedentary also is known to affect it. So being physically active during the daytime will also help amplify that normal, strong, healthy diurnal curve. And there are other potential factors, as I said before, certain toxins might affect this. Any sort of severe chronic inflammation or oxidative damage at the cellular level can potentially affect it. Hormones, as Brianna mentioned, can potentially affect it. So there are more exotic sort of potential causes of why you might have adrenal issues. But, honestly, I think for the vast majority of people, correcting circadian rhythm and sleep, if you correct, if you really have de-stressing rituals in the evening, and you optimize your activity level, you optimize your body composition, I would bet at least 90% of people, if not more like 99% of people, are going to be good to go with all of those things, plus good nutrition, as I mentioned before. So do you guys want to add anything there?
Yeah, actually, I want to refer everyone to the mindset lesson that Brianna wrote for the fat loss program, because I think and obviously the stress lesson, but I think something that's really important to realize with stress, including the physiological response to stress, is that it's all about perception. And this gets to the simple fact that certain events that are perceived as stressful are going to be stressful for some people, but not others. And so if you're able to change the way that you come at certain events, the way that you perceive how an event's going to affect you, you can change the entire stress response. I think some really easy, relatable examples to this are, if many of you haven't taken, for example, combat training sports. And so if somebody comes at you and attacks you, you're going to have a very fear response. Like, that's natural. But now let's replace you with like a professional MMA fighter or someone that's in the military that does this stuff for a living. If somebody started to attack them, their stress response would probably be minimal, if any, because they are so used to that condition. They perceive that attack completely differently. Instead of freaking out, so to speak, they just think about how to overcome it. It's just like natural to them. And so that applies to other areas in life.
So if you pose it as something like troubles as something that you're learning something from instead of like a burden to your life, that will help with your perceived stress load, because we only have so much stress we can handle. We have like a bucket. That's the analogy I like to use. And it fills up and it can only take so much before overfilling.
And so shifting your mindset is a way to lessen the load, maybe increase the size of your bucket, or maybe poke holes in the bucket you have so that some of the water in it drains out as it's filling up.
Nice. T said, how does energenesis relate to weight loss strategies? There's a number of studies that have linked mitochondrial health to obesity and diabetes and metabolic dysfunction. And this is a bidirectional link for sure. So we know that, obesity and diabetes create chronic inflammation, which itself shuts down mitochondria, will damage mitochondria and create excessive oxidative stress. But there's also research indicating the other pathway is true as well, that stronger, bigger, healthier mitochondria and more of them will, for example, will improve metabolic health, just to wrap that thought up, and improve energy generation. And with better energy levels, you are more likely to, for example, increase your NEAT and do exercise. And you'll have just a stronger baseline energy level that will be the foundation of your energy expenditure and your drive to physical movement throughout the day. So just that piece is really important. In addition, there's many different layers to this. I'm sure Alex and Brianna might have more to say after I'm done. But one other thing that I was going to say is, oh man, now I'm spacing on what it is. Just the physical, process of understanding that mitochondria are burning off the food that you consume, right? And so understand that when there is an overload of food coming into the system relative to what the mitochondria can process effectively, that overload, that excess of energy is itself a source of cellular damage and inflammation and oxidative stress. So while we don't necessarily have great studies testing this directly, like bigger mitochondria and more of them versus weaker, and given the same amount of food and how do they process it differently, just understanding the physiology of it, it is very likely that having bigger, stronger, healthier mitochondria are going to help mitigate and minimize or eliminate the damage of oxidative stress that might occur from chronic overfeeding or even brief periods of overfeeding. So, there's numerous layers to this. Alex, do you want to add anything to this?
I'll just expand on that last part by saying that it's not just during overfeeding. Theoretically, if you have more, bigger, stronger, faster mitochondria available to take in an energy load, when you eat, all that energy hitting your body is very poisonous. The entire reason why diabetes is associated with complications is because they have elevated blood glucose and blood fat, like chronically, and that damages organs and tissues. It's the same when you eat. And so your body protects you by storing those nutrients in muscle tissue, in fat tissue, or by burning them in your mitochondria. If you have more mitochondria, more of those nutrients can be burned off for energy or for heat production. But if you have less, if you have dysfunctional mitochondria, then your body's only option is to store them. And usually people with dysfunctional mitochondria have to store it in fat tissue because dysfunctional mitochondria tends to coexist with dysfunctional muscle tissue. So again, theoretical, but it could very well help in nutrient partitioning and help reduce any fat gain that does occur when you eat in general.
Yeah. And while Energenesis is not specifically designed as a weight loss supplement, we definitely have had a number of reports of people, for example, Susan Pierce Thompson has told me that she was at a plateau for a long time and that Energenesis was literally the thing that she felt kind of charged up her metabolism. That was kind of her subjective way of understanding it, was like this recharged her metabolism and helped her break through that plateau. And so she's a huge advocate. A lot of people in Bright Line Eating have bought Energenesis just based on the fact that Susan's had such amazing results with it. So again, not formulated as a weight loss supplement. Like this isn't filled with ephedrine or yohimbine or some of these, stimulants that are typically found in weight loss supplements. But by virtue of building mitochondria, you absolutely can get some of these benefits that Alex and I were just describing there. Naomi said, if calories are controlled, does alcohol affect fat burning during sleep? So I think the simple answer, as I remember it from physiology around alcohol consumption, is alcohol is burned first before sleep, so before fat. So if there's any alcohol in the system, those calories from the alcohol are processed. They're burned with higher priority than the fat is burned. So theoretically, however many calories of alcohol are there, or how many less calories you would burn of fat during that same period. Alex, you probably know that research better than I do.
Yeah, we just recently actually had this how alcohol affects fat loss as one of our little videos on our YouTube channel.
Oh, nice. There you go.
And so, yeah, exactly what you were saying is correct. Alcohol is prioritized first because it is absolutely a toxin. And so your liver spends all of its time trying to detoxify the alcohol. And in the process of doing that, it generates calories. And so those calories are available to use. So it displaces other nutrients like fat that you would use. This is compounded by the fact that any other nutrients, especially if you drink alcohol while eating food, because of that priority, and what we had just spoken about in the last question, your body's going to say, I have to store these other nutrients as fat to get them out of the blood because I can't burn them off. Because right now I need to deal with alcohol, which will damage me immensely if I don't. So that's two things. The other is that alcohol inhibits muscle protein synthesis, but normally only if you start to get into higher levels, like more than 3 drinks within a time frame. And so that means less muscle tissue. And the other huge part of it is that alcohol inhibits sleep. Anything over 1 drink, like, basically crushes your heart rate variability and interferes with sleep. Drinking alcohol close to bedtime, like in the evening, even with dinner, is probably one of the worst things you could do for your sleep.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, Helga is saying, I wake up every night at 1.5 to 2 hour intervals to go to the bathroom. It's annoying. What can I do to have longer stretches of sleep? Is that interrupting my inner cleanup? Probably referring to autophagy there. I can get up in the mornings easily though, but 1 o'clock in the afternoon, my brain seems to have a shutdown. I've done all the suggestions in the Energy Blueprint course. Okay, so the main thing to understand is disrupted circadian rhythm is the biggest, most common driver of this. If you really have done all the circadian rhythm strategies from the Energy Blueprint and you're still having this issue, I mean, usually in male, I would say probably prostatic hypertrophy in men. For women, maybe it's a hormonal thing relating to menopause. Brianna, I think you probably have some insight into this one.
Well, I'm guessing since you're in the program, you're dieting. I'm not sure about that, but it's very common with women that are dieting. And that's because we have smaller livers and smaller muscles. So we can't store as much glycogen, and we cut our carbs first because we don't get very many calories to eat. And so we get hypoglycemic through the night. That's usually what it is. I would suggest you up your carbs during the day. That's like my first line. And then there's more like that we can work on later if that doesn't work. But usually it is circadian rhythm, but the people that have it dialed in still have this issue when they're dieting. So
yeah, and
it's usually women.
Yeah, and then obviously low-hanging fruit, which you've probably already done, Helga, but just limit water consumption in the couple hours before bed as well.
If none of that works too, I mean, work with your doctor, because there can be definite like hormonal problems, possibly related to your antidiuretic hormone. And that, it's what Ari had mentioned in a previous thing, is there's this weird line in ethics between how much information do you want to give, because you don't want to scare people, but also you don't want to deprive them of information that could potentially be helpful. But if you have, for example, a growth on your pituitary gland that is secreting or is messing with your secretion of antidiuretic hormone, that could be the reason for the frequent nightly urinations. But that's something that, you need to work with a doctor with. So try everything else. But if none of that works, then it's definitely something that you don't want to just say, oh, I guess that's the way I am, because it's not normal. It's not how it's supposed to be.
For sure. Worth ruling out, more serious causes of a symptom like that, for sure.
Yeah.
Patty, I asked this question early and I think it fell off. If working out in a fasted state, should you have protein before or after working out? And if so, how much? Well, if you're fasted, then having protein before would ruin that fast, would make it so you're no longer in the fasted state. So yeah, I think that pretty much answers the question, actually. Yeah. So, I mean, if the goal is to work out in a fasted state, then the only option would be protein after, not before. Katrina, I want to try out intermittent fasting by skipping breakfast, which seems easier, but I also train in the morning, 2 days strength training with kettlebells and 2 days of running, 5K. I normally take a protein shake post-training to help muscle build and recovery. Should I skip my shake, or is it still beneficial to take the shake, maybe without combining the carbs? My quick answer would be, if you're doing any sort of weight training, I would have the shake. I would have protein very soon after. I wouldn't wait like 4 hours or 5 hours after training to consume any food. With the cardio, maybe arguably less important, but what are your thoughts on that?
Well, Yeah, 100% the same. When you exercise, your body enters into a catabolic state. It's going to be breaking down your tissue. The protein prevents that and shifts you into a growth promoting state, and that's what you want. Frankly, I don't have the context here, but I would just want to ask you, like, you want to try out intermittent fasting. Why does skipping breakfast seem easier if that's going to be the time when you're training? It seems like that should be, if you're going to do intermittent fasting, then you should probably make your first meal be your post-workout meal. Right. And then eat. I mean, even if it's just, a smaller meal, and then you could have a big lunch meal. Or I really think you should look at why you want to do intermittent fasting, why skipping breakfast would be easier, and then weigh those against the fact that you want to eat after you work out.
Yeah, so stated differently, the concern that all three of us are having here with this question is basically weighing the benefits of potentially integrating some sort of time-restricted feeding window versus the harms of not consuming food after working out. And I think probably all three of us would weigh in the direction of if you were doing that, if you're like, say, working out at 7 a.m. and then not consuming food till noon, you probably are in a scenario where the harms are going to outweigh the benefits. And so you might want to rethink the way you're doing that. I think that's a nice summary of probably all three of our views on that. Nadia is asking protein cooked or uncooked as far as weighing it. Brianna already answered that, and the answer was potentially in context dependent, but cooked is probably the easiest. Christine, it might be your, not a question. Soraya, how does red light therapy help with sleep? Does it improve melatonin to fall asleep and stay asleep? Does it help with deep sleep? There is some research suggesting that it can improve melatonin levels. I've seen one weird study. I'm actually trying to find this study that I encountered like 6 months ago, and I can't seem to find it anymore. But it was talking about increased cellular melatonin levels in response to red light. Yes, there's some research. There's also some research on like intranasal red light showing that it can increase melatonin levels. A lot of the research is from China. And it is a potential. The other aspect of it is using bright red light shining into your eyes close to bedtime can potentially, if the light is bright enough, can potentially suppress melatonin. So if you do it, you want to do it in a way where you're not blasting your face, your eyes with the red light, but potentially shine it on your back or in places where it's not, blasting your eyes with very bright light, and maybe do it an hour or an hour and a half before bed. Sherry, I can't step outside of my balcony for the morning because of smokers below my balcony. Oh man, I've been there. That's so annoying. I hate having smokers. Being in an apartment building where you have smokers next to you is the worst. I just ordered the light product. Do I have to stare at it for 10 minutes in the morning? Yes, is the short answer. 10 minutes sort of minimum. If you could do a little bit longer, that's ideal. Amy, could Brianna comment more about abstainer versus moderator? I feel I have the worst features of both.
Well, I would like to know what you mean by that, worst features of both. Moderation is defined uniquely by you. Like, I can't moderate certain things that he can moderate. So it's individual. And if you could give me some more details, I could elaborate on that a little more.
Okay. So we'll answer a question to give you some time to respond, and then we'll scroll up to see if you were able to elaborate on that, Amy. So, Rebecca, thoughts about ADHD usually being diet related or anything natural to help? Yeah, so there is. I had talked about this earlier. ADHD can commonly be related to diet, particularly a high intake of sugars and refined grains. There's also solid evidence linking the consumption of yellow food dyes to ADHD in children. So, mac and cheese, as I remember growing up. So eliminating that. As far as anything natural to help, it would just generally be stuff that is related to helping with focus and attention. So things like specific types of choline, like alpha GPC, CDP choline, uridine,
Huperzine A.
yeah, Huperzine A, Ultra Brain, basically. Sorry, I can't help it. I mean, it touches on everything. I actually have the ingredient list up if I can count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 compounds in it. Ari, what are you doing? 18 clinically effective brain boosting supplements in it. So, I mean, another shameless plug, but it's probably because I'm just really, really excited to start taking it.
Yeah.
It'll eliminate 10 bottles that we have.
Yeah, it eliminates a bunch of our supplements all in one.
Yeah, you mentioned this earlier, but probably the thing that's like most exciting to me, especially being, I have so many demands on me between running a business and 2 kids, and I'm also doing a master's program right now, and it's a lot. And so sometimes there's like so much work to do that I have anxiety about all the work that needs to get done. So I'm actually probably more than anything excited about, I guess, the nootropic, sort of focus boosting stuff is exciting, but the mood boosting, like the stuff that combats depression and anxiety, there's so many good ingredients in there that do that, that's probably the thing I'm looking forward to the most with it.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to scroll up real quick to see if Amy made some clarifications here. And yeah, I don't see any. That was regarding her abstainer versus moderator post.
We'll wait on that. Soraya has another question for you, Brianna. She said, I got the ABFX. I don't even know what that is.
It's a Yohimbine cream.
Oh, okay.
So I use it before I do cardio, and I use one of those neoprene like wrap things because it makes me sweat more and it gets more circulation to the area. So I figure it's going to help the Yohimbine and the caffeine work better for circulation. So that's how I use it.
I mentioned this last time in the call, but the neoprene wraps that just like, they look like they're such gimmicks and like that it would just totally be nonsense. And
I poke fun at her when she goes to wear it.
But I think it's legit. I think it's legitimate, that it would have benefits. It'd be interesting if there's a study that tests it at some point, but I do think the physiological plausibility of it is very high. Jeremy, do you recommend any natural supplements in place of Adderall for focus nootropics? Yeah, so we're coming out with Ultra Brain in the near future. There's a number of ingredients. I think we just basically answered this, so I won't belabor the point on that one. But yeah, there are a number of ingredients there that we just mentioned. Jody, would a coffee enema have the same effects as drinking coffee as far as adenosine? I do believe that you do get caffeine absorption into the bloodstream, even when you do it through the butt as opposed to the mouth. I've never done it myself, but I'm under that impression.
Yeah, you do. And you have to be careful with that too, because you're at a higher risk of toxicity because it avoids first pass metabolism by the liver.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Green tea, matcha is healthy, but has caffeine. So can you drink green tea daily, unlike coffee? Will it have the same negative effects as coffee? So the short answer is green tea and matcha have lower amount of caffeine, generally speaking, than coffee. And it really depends on how much of it you're consuming and your degree of sensitivity. So I find that I can have a cup of matcha a day, most days, and have no withdrawal effects at all. I find that if I have 1 cup of coffee a day, it takes only about 5 or 7 days for me to have significant withdrawals as soon as I go off of it. So again, there does seem to be some individual differences in the response to these different compounds and the degree of tolerance for different amounts of caffeine. So kind of experiment and see what works for you. Soraya, I'm using the Joovv light every morning for 30 minutes. This is red light therapy for people who don't know, as my morning routine in order to spot treat like a laser for 30 minutes. Is that too much and not good? I think it's perfectly fine. I like using the Joovv in the morning. What's the best way to spot treat with the 30 minutes duration that Brianna and Alex mentioned in previous sessions? So I don't know exactly what they mentioned, but my take on this would be use it specifically in the areas of your body that has stubborn fat, the area of fat that you most want to lose, and do that just before and potentially even during the period of exercise. So, and ideally in a fasted state. Is that along the lines of what you guys mentioned?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Christine, I did not purchase the strength training because I found in the past they're all way too hard for me. I'm 70. I even tried a personal trainer, but way too hard. Do you have any suggestions for me to start resistance? I'm walking 10 to 12,000 steps 5 days a week, but that's all. Sorry for the typos. Okay. So first of all, I'll mention in the strength blueprint, there is the most basic template is literally for people who are like coming from the extremes of chronic fatigue and are barely able to do any exercise at all, which is probably even more extreme than where you're at, Christine. So that's a good general template for you. And you might be ready for the second template, the one that's more advanced from there. Having said that, if you're at the most basic level of just wanting to start some resistance exercise, there are a number of just free videos on YouTube with basic body weight exercise routines that can take you through some basic, body weight squat variations or push-up variations and things like that. That can be a great base of resistance training. And that would be probably enough for you for like 2 or 3 months of workouts. And then if you're progressing, you'd hopefully get to the point where you're strong enough to move to the next level from there. Do you guys have any thoughts on this?
No, basically just doing appropriate body weight exercises for your strength. So like not doing a full push-up, for example, but modified on your knees. Just identifying your own limitations with exercises that have built-in safety nets. So on a push-up, if you fail, then you just drop your chest down to the floor. It's not like you risk having, like if you were to do a barbell squat, you have all this weight coming down on you. Mm-hmm. So things like that. Resistance bands come in a variety of resistances too, and those can be very helpful. Small dumbbells, depending on how strong you are. I mean, they make dumbbells all the way down to being 2 pounds. And so it's just figuring out where you're at currently and making it fun and like doing workout videos with appropriate amounts of resistance, because it's not a competition, it's a journey. It's a personal journey. So you just got to start somewhere and build your way up.
Yes, I agree with everything Alex said. The one thing I would add is just a caveat to resistance bands and the light dumbbells. This is a very common mistake that I've seen a lot of women make, and especially middle-aged or older women. And when I was in my 20s, I had many years of personal training, so I had a lot of experience with this. Most of my clients were women, and almost universally, women make the mistake of not using appropriate resistance. They stay at way too light of levels of resistance, whether you're using something like bands or free weights, and they don't know how to push themselves to actually the appropriate level of resistance to actually create a significant stimulus for muscle gain, which is really the goal of the whole thing. So they waste a lot of time. There's also a tendency for them to do exercises that have very poor bang for the buck, like isolating very small muscle groups like the biceps or the shoulder muscles, as opposed to doing, things like presses or rows or squats and deadlifts and, some of the bigger movement patterns that activate most of the body musculature. So in that sense, actually body weight exercise for someone in this kind of scenario, like to do just body weight squat variations or body weight, push-up variations, generally speaking, the people will be more likely to use to get to an appropriate amount of resistance doing something like that, as opposed to like if you give them 5-pound dumbbells or resistance bands or something, you'll end up challenging your muscles quite a bit more with body weight exercise. So just be aware that if you're new to resistance exercise, the actual appropriate level of resistance of how you should be challenging your muscles is probably way higher than you think it is, or you're currently like psychologically comfortable with. And that's a process of getting used to psychologically pushing your muscles with higher levels of resistance. Christine, is there a threshold that one has to pass regarding caffeine grams, hopefully not grams, but milligrams, to plug up the adenosine? I drink 1 cup of 80% dark hot chocolate with pea protein, collagen, vitamin C every day. Should I alternate days? What would tell me that every day is too much in terms of experimenting, like you mentioned? Well, so first of all, in terms of chocolate, in terms of cocoa, there is technically some caffeine, but it's a very, very small amount. Caffeine, cocoa has theobromine in it, which is a different stimulant. And there does seem also to be some individual variation in that. There's a small segment of people that seem to be affected strongly by theobromine. I think most people have no real significant stimulant effect from it. But this sounds like, more than anything, maybe just a misconception that you think that chocolate or cocoa has a lot of caffeine in it. So Christine, if I'm missing something here, feel free to rephrase. Rasheen, best appetite suppressant. Concerned that my appetite would go through the roof if I quit Adderall. Alex?
If you, one of the reasons why I recommend stepping down to something like ephedrine. It has the same appetite suppressing effects. It's just a less intense amphetamine. So it's a stepping stone.
While you're implementing like these lean habits too, because I mean, I've been on medications or whatever that suppress my appetite, and I come off and I'm still the same size. I don't ever gain weight. And that's because my habits are in place. So wean yourself off while implementing more and more of the lean habits.
Yeah, and then 5-HTP might be another one that can help you, especially if you're craving carbohydrates, which are notorious for increasing both dopamine and serotonin. So
nice. What was that one? Was it Garcinia, or I might be spacing on the specific herb, but there's one that has some research specifically showing that it decreases reward activation of, if you consume sugar and fatty, processed foods. There's one herb that's been shown to sort of decrease the amount of reward stimulus in the brain. What do you remember what herb that is?
Yeah, that might have been Garcinia.
Okay. But also worth maybe looking at that one.
Yeah.
Rebecca, any brand of melatonin is fine. Yeah, for the most part, I would say that. In general, go with a reputable brand. But I don't think there are big differences in the melatonin between different brands. Lori, I'm a Brightline eater, whole food, plant-based eater, and I'm going to add protein powder into my day. Nice. Likely just 1 scoop to start. Will this be best to add with my breakfast or post-workout in the late afternoon within 20 minutes, about an hour or so before I eat dinner, or add it with my dinner? I've heard many different things of when to load more protein in the day, and I'm confused. One constant advice is that I've seen is to add a protein drink right before if you go to bed. I would say no on that unless you're like a bodybuilder. But I'm trying to stay in the intermittent fasting window of 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. Okay, so no on the late night protein before bed, unless you're like trying to pursue competitive bodybuilding or something like that. And then I would say the 2 best places to add more protein would be morning with breakfast or right after your workout, potentially even right before your workout as well. That would be my thoughts. If your workout is super close, like if you end your workout super close to the time you eat dinner, then potentially with your dinner for that reason. But do you guys have any different thoughts on that?
I think if you're only adding 1 scoop at the moment, I would add it. I would just, you said you're eating dinner about an hour after you work out, so I would just have it with dinner. When you add in a 2nd scoop, have it at breakfast.
Nice. Rebecca's asking, how does Ultra Brain compare with Energenesis? And the answer is Ultra Brain is just really brain focused. So it's all about neurotransmitters, optimization, mood support, memory, and cognitive function. There's some ingredients that also tend to boost energy and brain energy specifically. So for example, like rhodiola rosea, and kind of focus and mood and energy tend to overlap to some degree. These are all kind of subjective things, and they're very much overlapping subjective things that we experience. So if you have a mood boost, you tend to also generally experience more energy, and vice versa. If you have something that creates more prolonged focus, that also can be sort of subjectively felt as more energy. But Ultra Brain is, optimizing neurotransmitters, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, just brain function and brain health specifically. Christine, I had a painful disagreement with a door, and the door won, with me ending up with quite a wallop on the top of my head. Actually, funny enough, I smashed my face into a door 2 nights ago when I took my dog was whining in the middle of the night. I had to take him out to pee, and I managed to whack myself with a door. So I know the feeling. I'm thinking using the red light would help. Do I need to try to part my hair as much as possible, or will the light work through the hair on the mega bruise? Yeah, so in general, you would need to part your hair. So if it's under all that hair, then yes, you would want to kind of work something in there. Some of the light will get through. I was just looking for one of my little flashlights, because if you have a red light flashlight, and you can get one off Amazon, you can potentially apply it directly on there and sort of work it in between the hair follicles that way. And that would be sort of the most ideal way to do it. But if you're using a panel from several inches away, most of the light won't make it through, but some still will. So you can potentially just use it for maybe twice as long as you normally would, from like 6 inches away, and that would, you'll still get a significant amount of light in there, but yeah, a lot of it will be blocked by the hair. Anne said, Brianna, I had severe difficulties in life when I've taken 5-HTP and also other antidepressant supplements. I think plugging neurotransmitter-based supplements needs to come with a warning.
Absolutely. We all have individual variations in our genetic makeup too that makes us more susceptible. What I meant about the bipolar mania is that there's plenty of research on it being dopamine excess. That does not mean that you won't experience difficulties from 5-HTP due to serotonin, because you could have issues with serotonin too. Always check with your doctor before taking anything like 5-HTP, especially if you're on antidepressants or medicated.
Nice. Charla, is Brianna available for personal consultations, like 30-minute phone calls, or do we need to email back and forth? Do you answer that, Brianna? I won't answer on
you. Yeah, you can schedule through my website. There's a scheduling tab, and I do that.
I was going to answer on your behalf. Yes, $1,000. I take 70% of the commissions. Yeah, just to be clear, you can do that with Brianna and directly. And we don't have anything within the Energy Blueprint that's for personal consultations. But if anybody's interested in doing personal consultations with Brianna or Alex, I don't know, Alex, are you interested in doing any personal consultations as well?
Well, both Brianna and myself are available for personal consults. I do actual consults where, just so that no one gets their hopes up. If you have a consult with me, it's like a one-time thing. Like, you pick my brain and I help you understand whatever you have questions with. But frankly, I can do that in the Facebook group too. Unless you have like a really complicated issue, I don't think you should feel like you need to pay me, because you already purchased the program, and so I'm here to help you. But if you do want actual one-on-one, yeah, you can pay me to pick my brain for an hour consult. Brianna does more coaching. She does consulting, but her thing is more working with you on a continual basis to help overcome whatever barriers are stopping you from achieving your goals. So that's a difference between us. But yeah, we're both available. But if you can get your questions answered in the Facebook group, then do that, because that saves you money. But if you do want extra assistance, then yeah, we're both available.
Yes, indeed. Kathy, what would you suggest for OCD sufferers? Would red light therapy help? And do you have any particular manufacturer to suggest? So I don't know off the top of my head if there's any research on red light therapy and OCD. As far as my recommendations for red light therapy devices, I have a book and there's a free article on the site with my recommendations as well. I don't have a lot of expertise on OCD specifically as far as what supplements can help. Brianna, you look like you got something.
I've been clinically diagnosed with bad thought OCD. And so the book that changed my life after like years of therapy and no help, there was The Imp of the Mind. Excellent book. But dialectical behavioral therapy could help too. As far as OCD, usually it's your genetic sequence that makes you not clear catecholamines well. And so you obsess over thoughts and ideas. Like that's what happens with nutrition for me too, is I get obsessed and then I just can't stop reading too. So it's a double edge.
I think all three of us have a little bit of
that OCD. Yeah.
With the health science stuff.
Yes. So I would recommend getting that book. And if you have any specific, because there's different variations of OCD, if you could get more specific, if you feel comfortable, then I can help you more.
Peg said, I'm a long haul truck driver. Any suggestions on combating issues with 11 hours of sitting? My recommendation would be stop every so often, get out and walk a little bit. If that's impossible due to, just needing to go and not being able to stop, and even for a few minutes, what I would suggest is isometric active muscle activity during the driving itself. So even something as simple as like butt flexes, have something that goes off every half an hour, a timer that goes off every half an hour, or a mindfulness bell or something like that. You can get a free mindfulness bell app on your phone. And every half an hour, do a bunch of butt and like leg muscle squeezes. So do like whatever, 30 or 50 of them. Just tense everything, contract. And so you should almost have if you do the butt squeezes as you're sitting, you should have like this kind of effect. You should actually like lift your body up. So it should kind of, be doing that every time you squeeze your butt in the seat. You can also do upper body stuff. So you can even do like, bicep flexes or tricep. Let me see if I can get, if you're doing bicep flexes or tricep flexes out here, just extending the muscles or pushing into the steering wheel, or putting your hands here and kind of pressing in to contract the chest and the triceps and to some extent the biceps as you're doing this. So you can do, 30 or 50 pulses like that. If you do that every half an hour during a very prolonged period of driving, it absolutely will mitigate it will mimic the physical movement of like walking and give you a lot of the benefits of if you were to actually get out and move your body more. And it will mitigate, some of the detrimental effects like increased insulin resistance and so on from prolonged sitting. Lori, best electrolytes that are more affordable for a low income person. I like things like Highlight and Pure Planet and Tonix Volt. Active Arizonian here. I like Concentrace a lot. The Energy Essential supplement also has a comprehensive multi-mineral aspect to it as well. But Concentrace Trace Mineral Supplement is great. Do you guys have any specific trace mineral formulas that you like, or electrolyte supplements?
Trace minerals is what I use.
Yeah, the trace minerals, if you're looking for more just general electrolytes, something like light salt will give you some sodium and potassium, especially if you're in Arizona where you're going to be sweating more. That's going to be important. And then as far as the other macro if I'm remembering correctly, Lori, you're vegan, and so you should be getting plenty of the other macro minerals like magnesium and calcium if you're eating leafy greens. So I would probably just swap out regular table salt with light salt. That's going to be half sodium and half potassium, and then take a trace mineral.
Nice. Brianna mentioned that taking 3 tablespoons of flaxseed oil would probably take up your daily fat consumption. Is this more because of the calories that add up or because of the amount of fat intake itself?
The calories.
Okay. Melanie, I did mean the fat loss fundamentals progress tracker in my first question. No big deal. I'm assuming the answer is yes. I believe it is yes. Rebecca, instead of Retin-A, if sensitive to that, could one use the crushed diamond tool, or is it too rough for older skin? Brianna, this sounds like a question for you. If you know what that is, I don't.
Yeah. It does something completely different. So it does micro damage and your skin repairs itself. And so it leads to a more youthful appearance. Does something completely different than the retinol. Retinol is a topical cream that increases the cell turnover. So it's different. Both of them are great though.
Nice.
I do both.
Cindy, I'm not a vegetarian, but don't eat a lot of meat. What are your thoughts on adding vital proteins, gelatin, or collagen peptides? Oh, I just saw a super funny story I have to say really quick. A friend of mine who's a practicing doctor had somebody in his clinic the other day, and he posted the sort of transcript of the interaction on his Facebook. And this person came in and said he's a vegetarian, and then the doctor, my friend, started asking him questions. So do you eat, dairy, milk, and cheese? Oh, yeah, I eat milk and dairy. Do you eat eggs? Yeah, I do. What about fish? Yeah, a couple times a week. What about chicken? Yeah, 2-3 times a week. What about turkey? Yeah, usually a couple times a week. And then he's like, what about beef? No, I never eat beef. I'm a vegetarian. So he's identifying as a vegetarian, even though he eats all these different sources of animal food. But anyway, what are your thoughts on adding vital proteins, gelatin, or collagen peptides? Short answer, I think it's a great idea. And
it shouldn't replace like actual protein in your diet, but it should supplement it.
Right. And it's not, also understand that it's not a replacement for meat. Meat is rich in a wide array of amino acids that you're not going to get from just taking gelatin or collagen. Now, you can get a lot of those same amino acids from adequate amounts of plant foods, from legumes, from nuts, seeds, and so on, and plant-based proteins. But don't think that you can eat like a low protein sort of vegan diet and then take collagen as your major source of protein, and that collagen is a good replacement for inadequate animal food intake. That's not a good way of thinking about it.
I want to use this to quickly touch on something related, since there are many whole food vegans that are listening that have been experimenting with adding in protein powder. I think it's important to point out that people, I don't know why many of you chose to eat a vegan diet. And that's important because some vegans will still supplement with certain animal derived products. It's just they don't want to eat animal food products. And so with collagen, it's important to understand that there is no such thing as a vegan collagen. Any single vegan collagen supplement is just several amino acids that are found in collagen, and that's it. Collagen is a purely animal-derived compound, so a vegan option cannot and does not exist. And you cannot take just the amino acids found in collagen, because one of the fundamental ways that collagen works as a supplement is that these long collagen proteins are not fully digested into just the amino acids that make them up. They're short little 2 to 3 amino acid chains that remain intact, and these enter into circulation, and these are the compounds that deposit themselves into your skin bone and joint tissue and stimulate collagen synthesis. It's not the amino acids per se. Those just serve as a building block. But the actual whistleblower saying, hey, we need to create more collagen is the collagen peptides.
Sandra said, my fasting morning blood sugar is often in the pre-diabetic range. How do I know if it's because I'm over my fat threshold or if it's because I'm toxic, preventing the insulin from getting into the cells? I don't think it's because I'm eating too much, because I'm losing weight. Do you guys want to take this? I know you have some unique expertise around fasting morning blood sugar, pre-diabetic range in the morning.
So if your fasting blood sugar is elevated only in the morning and it tends to go down like when you eat, then it's normally related to a cortisol awakening response, which can be amplified when you're eating a low calorie or low carbohydrate diet, just because you tend to have more amplified stress hormones in those states as a survival mechanism. In that case, it's completely benign and it'll dissipate once you start eating normally again. However, if your fasting blood sugar is elevated throughout the day, then it is likely that you still have fat that is deposited in your liver, and continuing on your weight loss journey will help get rid of it and resolve the issue over time.
Nice. Christine, how can someone, and we have quite a bit more questions and we're already at 2 hours, so maybe we'll try and pick up the pace of answering these questions at this point. How can someone develop food sensitivity by consuming it on a regular basis? Ari mentioned it about dairy. I've also heard the same thing regarding nut milks, to rotate between different nut milks so you don't develop an allergy to it. You know, to be honest, I don't necessarily have any understanding of a specific physiological mechanism behind why regular frequent consumption of a particular food would be more likely to cause a food allergy. And I don't even know if there's any kind of specific evidence that we could point to sort of prove that. But it does seem to be sort of universally accepted, and there's lots of anecdotes, thousands of anecdotes of people reporting that. So I definitely think that is the case, even though we don't necessarily have good science. Are you guys aware of any specific physiological mechanism that would be responsible?
No, not a physiological mechanism, but kind of like what you just said. The way I like to think about it is some people develop type 1 diabetes when they're like a middle-aged adult. So I think that it just comes down to genetics and genetic susceptibility. You could probably get away with consuming a food for a while, but then something just ends up clicking and your immune system decides it doesn't like it anymore. And that's what the food sensitivity would be, is an overreactive immune response to whatever you ate. So as much as I hate to say it, I think that it's just kind of one of those things where it's a chance, like it could happen, or maybe it won't.
Mm-hmm. Brianna, your skin is beautiful. What do you routinely use?
Well, I do a lot of stuff. Why don't you tag me in the group and I will post some of the brands I use.
Alex and I get no love yet again. Anne said, would you please speak to weight loss as a vegan? I still have a mental block on, is there enough protein? Weight loss seems easier with lean animal protein. Alex, do you want to take that?
Yeah, it sounds like you want to go vegan, but you're worried that weight loss will not be as easy because of your experience with including lean animal protein. I think it's going to be variable for different people. I think that animal protein is an excellent source of highly bioavailable protein. And so in that regard, it's doing its job for you. If I think that you could consider going vegetarian and still maintaining intake of, for example, fish or chicken, and getting a lot of the benefits of eating a vegan diet without having to exclude the lean animal protein. I don't want to turn this into a health issue, but I think that moderate consumption of lean, healthily cooked cooked lean animal proteins is not going to be a health concern in the context of a diet that is rich in vegetables and plant matter. And so I don't think that, and if you're doing it for ethical reasons, for example, there's ways to overcome that by, for example, opting for meat that is very humanely and sustainably raised. I think that there's a lot of ways, like if you post this in the group and expand on what these like mental blocks are, then we can help you work through them.
Nice. Christine said also, actually, the guy's skin looks great as well. There we go. I guess we do get some love. Alex has something unique going for him, though. He's still in his 20s. He's still a youngin. Alex, are you 26 or 27 now?
I'm 28.
28. Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
I'm almost 10 years older than Alex.
Yeah, but the thing is
and
Brianna,
I think you're the same age as me. Are you 35, 36?
6 in March.
Okay.
But here's the thing, Ari, and Brianna reminds me of this constantly, is that men tend to age more gracefully than women do.
Better as they get older.
Yeah. Well, also there's like, I don't know. I think girls are attracted to young guys sometimes, but maybe for short term, and then the older, stereotypically speaking, the older, more mature guy is thought to be attractive. So guys who are in their 40s and 50s who even have a little bit of aged look are still viewed as attractive, whereas women culturally tend to,
we're valued off of our looks more and our youth, and so it goes away quickly. Whereas
men, and this is an interesting evolutionary discussion, but men tend to be more valued on security and resources, and you tend to accumulate those with age. In the modern world, and so that's one reason for the difference, I think.
Yes, it's nice. My wife has been with me since I was young and poor, which I like, though.
Same with Brianna.
She likes me for the right reasons because of that,
Yeah, it's the same with Brianna. She was dating older men in New York before I moved there. Who were much more successful than me, but then she dropped them to be with me, and it ended up working out. So thanks, babe.
Right. Smart move, Brianna. Okay, Carrie. Food for Life Ezekiel bread. This is just a tip. So Food for Life Ezekiel bread is also flourless, sprouted grains, organic and non-GMO, as well as low glycemic. Trader Joe's carries it. Yeah, thank you for that, Carrie. Tosh, how about sweet leaf stevia powder in packets? I believe that one is okay.
That's fine.
And Anne saying, I have a question about weight gain. My partner is 5'11" and 120 pounds. Ooh, that's thin. I'm 5'11" and 200 pounds. And it's genetic. Mother and father and kids, all slender. He's very physically active. Seems impossible to gain weight. We eat excellent quality food. He's now vegan, although his slimness was the same when eating meat. Rule out, I would say, any kind of like severe absorption problem, like a gut health problem that limits absorption of nutrients. Outside of that, I would just say eat more protein and do more weightlifting. But do you guys have any thoughts on that?
No, agree with you. Another thing would be like a parasite. So yeah, I would just look at any and everything related to the gut. And if everything's clean there, then he just needs to eat more. He or she, I should say your partner, just needs to eat more. He is now vegan. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, he just needs to eat more. Frankly, I don't think vegan is the best dietary choice for someone that's struggling with underweight. Yeah. Because it's not energy dense.
Worth mentioning, Alex, the kind of explanation of sarcopenia here, just for people.
True. So one of the other reasons we focus on muscle in this thing is because of a condition called sarcopenia. This is traditionally been defined as the age-related loss of muscle mass and muscle function, but literally 1 in 10 adults age 20 to 30 years old now has it, and about 3 to 4 out of every 10 adults aged 30 to 50 has it. So it's no longer age-related. It is the leading cause of premature death. in people as they age. It is the leading cause of reduced quality of life. It is the primary risk factor for suffering from frailty, which itself is the primary cause of being put in a hospital, being put in a nursing home, and suffering from falls and fractures. Having low muscle mass is probably one of the worst things that can occur with aging. So I don't know what your age of your partner is, Anne, but this is something that should definitely be addressed for long-term health.
Yeah, like I wanted to make sure that people understand that this is an actual danger, especially as you get older, to have this going on, and it's the sooner you can start to correct it, especially gaining more muscle mass, the better. Also, just mentioning the whole food palatability and reward aspect of things. Obviously, there's fat loss program, so we're really emphasizing how modulating the food reward and palatability of the diet will bring down calorie intake and bring up satiety simultaneously. In someone like this, you may actually want to be doing the opposite. You may want to go out of your way, not necessarily to eat unhealthy processed foods, but to eat higher palatability of the diet and specifically put more added fats and more added carbs into the diet. So, one example I can think of that's still healthy is last night I had a sweet potato, like a huge sweet potato, and I love putting honey on it. So if honey and cinnamon, you could put some coconut cream on there, and by adding, those extra sources of sugar and fatty foods to it, you're going to increase overall calorie intake. And also drive up, decrease satiety at the same time and drive up the overall amount of calories consumed. So worth sort of moving in the opposite of the typical direction that we're recommending in this program for someone in that scenario. But again, focusing on protein in particular. Christine, is it possible to be food sensitive to egg whites but feel fine eating egg yolks? This has been an observation I've noticed, but not sure if it makes sense. Yeah, it is possible to have that going on for sure. Donna, I'm sorry, but just jumped on, so not sure if this has been asked. I'm female, 62, 5'5", 270. Obviously need to lose weight. How much protein should I eat daily? The videos were in kilograms and couldn't figure out how to convert it to grams based on my weight. So kilograms are, there's 2.2 pounds in a kilogram. So if you just figure out that, but there's a simple conversion. Alex, what's the conversion off the... I know you know it off the top of your head. Just the amount of protein, grams of protein per pound of body weight.
Oh God, it's 0.55 equals 1.2 and 0.65 equals 1.5. Let me say this. When I go back and update, I'm going to use both units. That's one of the things I want to do. Because most of the scientific literature is in metric, which is why I stuck with kilograms. In the group files, there is an image where I list both your weight in pounds. I put what the kilogram conversion is, and then I just tell you how much protein at various levels of protein intake you should aim for. So you could just use that file to find your weight. Frankly, if you just want an answer right now, I would aim for about 120 to 150 grams of protein, and as a daily target.
Nice. Laurel is telling me that I have very cool parents. I don't know how you know, but I can assure you you're totally wrong.
Your parents didn't put you.
I wonder if that secretly is my mom posing with a fake name named
right.
Laurel. And she's like, "You have the coolest mom ever." That sounds like something my mom would do.
Oh, that's funny. I think it's because they didn't put you on the medications.
Yes. Oh, that's probably what Laurel's referencing. Yes. Thank you, Alex, for connecting the dots. I was thinking Laurel is just a stalker and is checking out my parents' Google image searches or something. I'm just kidding, Laurel. Rasheen, can she spell the lymph herbal blend? Yeah. SEAC, right?
Yep. It's like Casey spelled backwards, but Alex is grabbing the bottle, so we can.
It's ESSIAC.
Yeah, you got it.
Rasheen, what do you guys all eat in a typical day? Okay. So well, to be honest, I didn't get to have my breakfast prior to this. I was in the sauna just prior to this, and I didn't have enough time to eat breakfast. But I ended up just having a little smoothie bowl. We do a lot of smoothie bowls at my house with like tons of berries and superfoods and cacao nibs and nuts and seeds and things like that. Sometimes sprinkle some homemade granola on top. Usually we throw a bunch of plant-based protein powder in there in the base mix. So that might be a typical breakfast for me. I'm about to sit down and eat some eggs with a bunch of sauerkraut, kimchi, some other greens, and what else is there? I think sourdough, a couple pieces of sourdough bread that are covered in avocado. And yeah, that's going to be my breakfast. I often I eat a lot of seafood, sweet potatoes and veggies, salads, things like that. Do you guys want to sort of give a quick breakdown?
Yeah, for breakfast, I usually do a smoothie with berries in it and fiber and various like green supplements in there. I'll eat whole eggs. For lunch, I do a huge salad every day with a bunch of different veggies in it. I use Siggy's and fat-free cheese in there and some nuts for fat. Sometimes MCT, sometimes avocado, depends. And dinner, I have oat bran every night because it makes me sleep really good. And then I'll have a question. Yeah, I love oat bran.
Oat bran makes you sleep well?
Yeah, I think it's just because I don't get a super high insulin response and it keeps my blood sugar stable through the night, almost like beans do the same thing for me.
Interesting. So you do that like as a dish or as a supplement?
Yeah,
with your dinner.
Okay. Like I either make pancakes or a bowl of oat bran, like almost like oatmeal, like made like that with cocoa powder and.
Yeah, and that meal is normally eaten like 3 hours before she climbs into bed, maybe 4 hours before she goes to sleep. So it's been a surprising impact, really.
Nice.
So with me, my breakfast, I like to kind of front load most of my fat because it gives me energy through the morning without filling me up a lot. So it'll just be protein and fat. Normally it's eggs with nuts, avocado. What else do I eat?
Isn't it hard to remember sometimes? It's like on what I eat.
Some chocolate. I have like little paleo chicken sausage sometimes. And then that's it, give or take. Oh, and an apple. I have an apple. And then for lunch, I have a big bowl of oat bran mixed with blueberries, or whatever berries I have on hand, and I'll have some potatoes and some sort of white fish like tuna or cod or something of that nature. And then for dinner, I'll have a huge bowl of either quinoa or brown rice mixed with black beans, and steamed vegetables, and I'll top it with some chicken breast.
Nice. My two weaknesses are granola, homemade granola. We make really good quality, but still calorie dense and easy to overconsume. And I have a weakness for peanut butter. So like a common lunch for me is like a can of sardines or a can of Alaskan salmon, like on a bed of greens, and then one or two apples with a giant amount of peanut butter. And it's not the most conducive to fat loss to do that, but that's part of the reason that having really high levels of meat and physical activity are beneficial, because it allows you to indulge a little bit in those foods that you love having and sort of can't live without, while staying lean.
Yep.
Yeah. Joanne, I'm 74, diagnosed as hidden obese, currently weigh 160, but 38% body fat, can almost just see my muscle mass disappear over the last year or so. Sarcopenia? Yeah, sounds like it. Should I focus on weight training or protein intake first? I would say both. Regarding protein intake, how many grams per day for me is best? And when I wake up, sorry, when up, sorry, it's a little bit of a typos here, trying to make sense of the sentence. Are we designating protein per kilogram of body weight? Are you talking about body weight or lean body weight, current weight or goal weight? Alex, do you want to just give some specific sort of protein recommendations, grams per day?
So for you, I would recommend 110 grams of protein per day, which would be 1.5 grams per kilogram of total body weight. I use total body weight because even though lean body weight would be much more accurate, most of the research doesn't use lean body weight because it's much more it's more difficult and more costly to measure someone's body composition accurately than to have them step on a scale. So I just stick with the research and use total body weight for 95% of circumstances.
Nice. Christine, is it a good idea to take the occasional day off from taking vitamin and mineral supplements, or is it better not to try to skip a day? If you're using a comprehensive sort of multivitamin and mineral, first of all, I'll say any answer here is speculative. Like there's no clear data, any sort of long-term study of people who either took a multivitamin every day or, skipping a day here and there. So my personal intuitive feel about what I do is like I take a day off every now and then. It's just speculative. Is it wrong to take it every day without exception? No, not necessarily. So, do you guys have any more concrete answers than that? I'd say sort of go by feel.
Yeah, I think it depends on the compound too. Some like creatine is a good example. Creatine, its entire effect is because you saturate your muscle tissue with it. And so you have to take it regularly. But something like caffeine, you don't want to take it regularly because that would negate the effects.
Oh yeah. So let me clarify. So maybe I didn't interpret the question correctly. So I'm answering specifically in the context of like a multivitamin mineral supplement. If we're talking about the whole category of like supplements entirely, like there's a massive variety of different answers of like the right way to use specific compounds, how long you might want to use them, should you take days off and so on. And in a lot of cases, the answer is yes. But if we're talking about specifically like a multivitamin mineral supplement, then
I don't see
every day is fine.
Yeah, I don't see the point of skipping. You should be getting all the vitamins and minerals on a daily basis from your diet anyway. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, if you're taking a supplement, I don't see why it would be any different from that.
Yeah. My thinking, like just intuitive thinking is sort of, like something like zinc or copper or selenium, like take a day off or a couple days off every now and then to sort of burn through in case there's any potential, in case there's a little bit of excess.
Yeah.
But it's just like, is there any science behind me doing that? Not really. It's just kind of like in my head, it seems like a good idea. But yeah. Okay, Renee, is there any extra benefit for postmenopausal women struggling with stubborn fat to do more than 16 hours of fasting per day, meaning more like 18 to 20? My attitude towards this is once you get lower than like 6 hours, lower than maybe arguably 8, but lower than 6, certainly, the potential for more added benefits by going from like a 6-hour feeding window to a 3-hour feeding window is probably pretty minimal. But Alex, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree completely. And you can probably get away with it better the more overweight or obese you are. But the more you return towards a normal body weight, the more detrimental extended fasting is going to be.
Mm-hmm. Lori said your discussion on collagen reminds me of Dave Asprey, who's majorly pro collagen. As a plant-based eater, the thought of eating bovine hide powder turns me way off. Yeah, actually, I had mentioned a couple of people that were eating like their main source of protein was collagen. They were actually people who were sort of in that biohacking movement who had been convinced that collagen is, the most advanced, special, amazing protein in existence.
I want to address that second part real quick, though.
Yeah.
I agree with you in the sense that eating the cow skin can be off-putting. And so for me personally, that's one of the reasons why I like Great Lakes collagen, because they don't waste anything. They have grass-fed pastured cows raised in the Andes Mountains that are then butchered for grass-fed high-quality meat. And instead of getting rid of the skin, that skin is then turned into their hydrolyzed collagen powder. So they use the entire animal. They don't let it go to waste. It's very ethical. And they have high standards. Like, they test every batch for heavy metal contamination, pesticide contamination, and they share all those test results freely with you, so that you can see they have a high quality product. So I know eating skin can be very off-putting for
That's
many people.
conditioning as well. Like, we are conditioned to think of certain things as gross, like, but that's not natural.
Yeah. I remember when I was a kid, before learning about, collagen and kind of the benefits of it, I remember seeing in some of my travels people eating like broths with chicken feet in them, and being like, coming, as an American kid, like something like that seems really bizarre and like primitive and gross. It's like there's like feet of an animal, floating around in your soup. But now we actually do that all the time, and you normalize to it. So a lot of the things that we think are gross or weird it's just a cultural thing, and with a little bit of sort of reframing of it, we can normalize to even those things pretty quickly. Bobby said, can you expand on 5-HTP, synephrine, and yohimbine? I'm a female who's hungry all the time, active, but overeat, but overeating keeps me from my goals. There's a lot of controversy on some of these. So can you explain more about the safety of these, along with the brands you use and how much to use? 135 pounds and want to be 125 and maintain, which seems to be the hardest part. Brianna, this seems, and both of you actually, seems to be up your alley.
Well, I'll comment first and say that I totally acknowledge the safety. It's kind of self-evident that anyone with specific medical conditions where their doctor tells them to like not use a stimulant, for example, should avoid it. And for those reasons, I don't specifically put in the presentations for every supplement, hey, if your doctor tells you not to use this, don't use it. However, for things like yohimbine, I specifically mention that side effects can be more severe with the entire bark, which is called yohimbi, rather than the isolated bioactive, which is called yohimbine. And I also mentioned it does need to be avoided by anyone who's susceptible to anxiety or heart problems. So I do try to keep safety in mind when I'm advising on these supplements. So yeah, as far as
someone has an issue with something doesn't mean that no one can use it, right? And so that was as far as your appetite being crazy, eat more high volume, low calorie foods. Like, that's the trick for us small girls. There's really no way around it. Most of my diet is vegetables. Like, I eat pounds of vegetables a day. And the miracle noodles when I'm dieting, like if I'm still hungry after dinner, I make those and then I'm satiated. So those are some tricks.
Yeah, there really isn't going, a supplement is not going to replace the dietary changes necessary. And to kind of take this argument to the logical extreme, if I am starving myself and not eating anything, I can't take a supplement and expect it to reduce the appetite. I would need to make dietary changes. And so it's going to be same to you. The dosage recommendations for using any of these supplements clinically effectively is in the presentation, lesson 16. So you can go there to check them out. Nice.
Christine said, and this is for you, Alex, I know you have expertise on this. What are your thoughts on apple cider vinegar and lemon juice for improved digestion? And can drinking a fresh squeezed lemon every day hurt the enamel of the teeth?
They can definitely help with indigestion and help make your stomach at ease. I think vinegar is going to be more effective than lemon juice because it's a more powerful acid.
Yeah, so I had issues with any kind of acids and teeth sensitivity when I was a vegan. And even when I started eating meat again, it was insufficient. It came down to not eating enough K2. So once I took that supplement, acids do not bother my teeth at all. anymore. And this is like going on years.
K2 fixed your teeth sensitivity.
Yes. And I think I just wasn't getting enough on my vegan and low protein, low animal product diet. And so when I started supplementing, it went away even before I was meeting the requirements in my diet.
Nice.
And there's genetic variations in how much K2 you need. And so some people need more.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to skip a couple questions that I already answered here. Sherry said, will there be a sheet on some of the suggestions? For example, vitamin B names for migraines and thyroid guy Brianna mentioned. We can type those out. So Brianna and Alex, do you want to?
It would just be easier, Sherry, if you made a post in the Facebook group and tagged us. Because especially because this chat's going to disappear when we're done talking, and we don't want to spend time right now typing something out.
Yeah, that's a good way of answering it. And then there will be a recording of this too, and you can potentially go back and find that, or you can post in the Facebook group. Pamela, when I increased my protein, my fat intake raised a lot. Or you answered that one. Janice, do you have any suggestions? Whoa, disappeared. Do you have any suggestions to prevent nighttime waking to use the bathroom? I try to limit water intake, but still wake up 3 to 4 times a night to use the bathroom. Yeah, we kind of answered this earlier, but circadian rhythm optimization is the biggest factor for most people. And usually that solves the issue for the vast majority of people. And then if not, then you potentially, kind of consider other potential causes. Stress and dieting also can cause a lot of nighttime wake ups. Hypoglycemia can potentially cause it. So there's some other potential factors. If all of those have been ruled out, then you look at potential medical issues that could be causing it. Okay, Jeremy, how do you recommend cooking animal proteins, chicken, beef, or fish? Ari has mentioned high heat grilling. High heat or / grilling can cause AGEs, advanced glycation end products, which lead to unhealthy byproducts. So any sort of low temperature cooking, steaming, boiling in general, water-based cooking is a good idea. If you do any sort of grilling or like that kind of thing, the lower the heat, the better. Do you guys have any extra thoughts on that one?
No, low heat cooking is for the win. Oh, okay. I will answer real quick. This is really cool too, because there is a year-long study in postmenopausal women. Had them make no changes to their diet other than just change the way they cooked meat. That was it. They went from high heat to low heat cooking. After 1 year, cut their insulin resistance in half without any change in body weight. And the only recommendation was telling them to change the way they cook their meat.
Oh, wow, that's awesome. I haven't seen that. And that's amazing. The effect size was that big.
Yeah.
Very cool. Christine said, is it safe to take 10,000 IUs of vitamin A daily if I have extreme dry scalp and dry skin, or is it better to alternate days?
It's perfectly safe. You can even, some people with certain conditions, like go up to 50,000 IUs a day. So 10,000 is fine and it's safe.
Nice. And there's some concern only just around pregnancy, right? For women. With vitamin
you want to be extra cautious with everything.
Do you know the level off the top of your head? I forget.
No, I don't. Not off the top of my head.
Okay. But just consider that if you're thinking about getting pregnant, just be aware of, potentially overdoing it with vitamin A and look up the appropriate amounts in that context. If you're not worried about getting pregnant, then don't worry about it. Beth, how do you suggest shift workers deal with circadian rhythms? So we answered this in the last call. I mentioned this is always my least favorite question to answer. The very short version of the answer is, as long as you're working night shifts, you are necessarily always going to have some degree of dysfunction in your circadian rhythm, but you can potentially use blue blockers and blackout shades in your room and things like that at the appropriate times to help sleep when you want to sleep, and also during the night shift while you're working. Alex mentioned this in the last call, wearing blue blockers to at least allow melatonin to increase, because melatonin, even if you're not necessarily sleeping, melatonin has enormous health benefits. as far as protecting mitochondria, protecting the brain, protecting against cancer. It has anti-cancer mechanisms, many other benefits. So at the very least, during that nighttime period, have some melatonin circulating in your system. Do you guys want to add? I'm trying to do the very short version of that answer.
If you have trouble seeing with any like really good blue blocking glasses that also tend to block out green light, then studies have shown notable benefits using just amber glasses, and those tend to allow for much better vision.
Mm-hmm. Kathy, lost weight everywhere, but still having fat in tummy and midsection area that doesn't seem to be willing to go away. Any suggestion on how to address that? Do you guys want to take that one?
I think you just need to keep losing fat.
Yeah.
Whatever your hormonal pattern is going to determine where your fat stores primarily and where the stubborn fat lays. But the solution is really going to be the same. You just need to lose more fat mass.
Yeah. So there's everybody has some uniqueness. There's male and female differences typically, and there's also individual differences. Sometimes females don't store it in the typical female area. Sometimes it's more in the midsection.
Stress, I would want to know about too, because stress can really send more fat to be stored in the abdominal area, especially for women.
Sugar.
Yeah.
The cortisol. So, and if you're eating a lot of sugar, so I would want to make sure those things are in check.
Yeah, I think PCOS does as well, polycystic ovarian syndrome. And basically what Alex said, just to elaborate on that, like the fat is on your body wherever the fat is. And there are no special, like there isn't a unique system of fat loss strategies designed for fat loss on the stomach versus the thighs. The goal is fat loss, regardless of where that fat is on your body. And if you have more fat than you'd like, whether it's in your stomach or your butt or your thighs or your love handles or wherever it is, the goal is keep losing more fat, and eventually your body's going to pull from those areas. Laurel, what's your option of using the UBV? Maybe you mean UVB light, either right before bed or right after the red light. Oh, sorry, either right, I added bed there, either right before or right after the red light. I would actually say use it during. If you're going to use one after the other, I would say use the red light first, because there's research showing that red and near infrared light have a sort of preconditioning effect that protects the skin from potential damage from UV light. But you could also use them simultaneously if you wanted to save time. Naomi's asking, will there be a replay? Yes, we'll record all of these and post the replays. Johanna said, Alex, you mentioned I should drink milkshakes and said it's okay to have goat whey. Is it better to have it on its own or combined with spirulina and collagen, etc.? I learned it's better to have salad or vegetable juice first before anything else. You mentioned to have the milkshake first and then the salad/juice. Have I misunderstood? Thanks so much for everything.
So I want to clarify. I'm assuming by milkshake you mean like some form of a protein shake. That's possible.
Alex, you told me to have milkshakes filled with ice cream and maple syrup. I've really been enjoying them, but I haven't been losing much fat.
Yeah, well, you have a high NEAT, so you can handle it.
Oh, milkshakes are the best. I wish I could actually still drink them.
Oh, that's one of the bad things, to kind of digress briefly, is having all this knowledge on nutrition. I'll like see something and I'm like a milkshake, and it's just like, I really wish I could just bring myself to consume it.
Yeah. Totally.
Ignorance is bliss in a sense.
Yeah.
But to get to the question, I think so. If it's a protein shake, maybe you're making it with some form of milk or nut-based milk. I think that combining it with spirulina and collagen is perfectly fine. And I don't think it matters whether you drink it before or after the vegetable juice and salad. Where that advice comes from and where there may be a misunderstanding is that if you want to consume your protein first so that you ensure that you're getting adequate protein in the day, and it tends to fill you up. So do fibrous vegetables. But because protein plays that important structural role for muscle tissue, I would rather have you fill up on protein and support your metabolically healthy lean mass than fill up on vegetables and not get adequate protein in the day. So it's protein first, veggies second, both for the satiety reasons. And also, if you eat protein and vegetables first in a meal, and if you have any other forms of carbohydrate later in the meal, it'll also help improve your insulin and glucose responses to eating.
Nice. Christine just has some compliments. She said these Q&As with the three of you are terrific. Thank you, Christine. Glad you're enjoying it. When using grounding/earthing mats, should we be concerned about dirty electricity if we don't have a way of measuring if it's there, or do the benefits of grounding earthing mats outweigh the concerns about any possible dirty electricity? Did you guys recommend at all these grounding mats in the program? I don't think so, right? My general
in the last Q&A, I mentioned grounding as being a way for like stress relief and like outside and everything. And so then maybe a grounding mat came into the discussion, but I don't remember.
Yeah, in general, I'm not pro the grounding and earthing mats, just because I've heard so many mixed reports about the potential for these things to, like, people actually reporting negative effects from them, or the potential for it to pull sort of dirty electricity through your body since your body's being grounded, if you're near electronic devices and things of that nature. So I personally have just recommended caution around grounding and earthing mats. I do think that there's some legitimacy to actual grounding with your feet on the earth, but I'm not a fan of the grounding devices. Laurel said, I make my own milk kefir using kefir grains and grass-fed milk. I also make kefir cheese, which provides clear milk whey as it separates from the milk solids. Is this whey as good as dried isolate milk whey protein? I do this for the high levels of probiotics to feed my microbiome. Yeah, I believe it's perfectly wonderful. I think you might have to consume a lot of it to get significant, to get to the same sort of levels that you get from the whey protein powder.
Yeah, and it also, liquid whey tends to be higher in carbohydrates and lactose because that lactose separates out along with it. So when whey protein powders are made, they take that liquid whey and they filter it so that it removes any residual lactose and other molecules other than the whey protein, and then they dry it into a powder. Yeah. So it's going to be a carbohydrate-rich, protein-rich substance. It's not going to be just protein.
Mm-hmm. Jody said, I just had a pelvic ultrasound showing my submucosal fibroid has slowly been enlarging, went from 4.4 to 6 centimeters. Went from 4.4 to 4.8 over the last 6 months. I've limited phytoestrogens as best as I can and drink chasteberry tea. I don't want surgery. I'm 50. Any advice how to lower estrogen or balance it with progesterone?
Yeah, the thing that I would do first is add, because the chasteberry is great, I would add more fiber. Fiber can actually stop ovulation by blunting estrogen. So by eating massive amounts of fiber. So I would up your fiber and support your liver with things like milk thistle and NAC or glutathione.
Nice. I would also add one of my good friends, Magdalena. She has a weird Polish last name. It's pronounced Shalaki, but it's spelled WSZ ELAKI. Okay, Magdalena, like just put in to Google Magdalena W something, and then it should come up. And she has a website called Hormones Balance, and she's written a wonderful, wonderful cookbook called Cooking for Hormone Balance. And she talks a lot about using different nutrition and supplement and herbal strategies for correcting estrogen dominance. So that's a wonderful tool in addition to what Brianna mentioned. Sherry, I've decided to start red light therapy and the infrared cocoon at California Sun. I'm still trying to confirm with you that this is what you recommend. Yeah, that would be perfectly a fine way to do it. Kelly, the cutting out of the broadcast is very frustrating. Sorry about that. I have no idea what could be causing that. We're fine. No tech issues on our end. Yeah, we don't seem to be overloaded with too many people. I've had 10 times this many people on for some live webinar, so I don't know what could explain that, but I apologize. Lori, best electrolytes that are more affordable for a low income person. I think we already answered that one, but Concentrace or the Trace Light. What did you guys say?
Yeah, those ones.
Okay.
And yeah, we did answer that, and the one above it also by Lori.
Okay. FYI, magnesium glycinate really helps with sleep. It is water soluble, so you can take more if needed. My daughter was not sleeping, added this, is now sleeping so much better. Yes, and both magnesium and glycine have some unique benefits for sleep, whether taken together or separately. Christine, in addition to the growth promoting benefits discussed in the Fat Loss Blueprint, is eating protein with every meal what helps us to keep our blood sugar in balance versus, for example, eating some fruit by itself or carbs by itself? Is eating protein the best way to keep our blood sugar levels stable? Yeah, it is a key way to keep blood sugar stable for sure. Alex, do you want to speak on that in depth, or?
No, not in depth. Eat it. There's numerous reasons to eat at every meal. That includes the blood sugar regulation, but it also includes supporting your muscle tissue. I will say that eating pure carbohydrates in isolation, even if it's something like a fruit, is the absolute worst thing you can do for blood sugar regulation.
Yeah. Cindy, any chance you'll ever make an unsweetened version of Energenesis? I love the results, but found it too sweet. I eventually stopped taking it. The chances of that happening are probably slim to none. And I've seen people request this before, but trust me when I tell you, having taken the base formula before it's flavored or sweetened or anything like that, you don't actually want what you think you want. It tastes horrific. I mean, we're not talking about like just proteins or carbs or a meal replacement shake. We're talking about really nasty tasting substances that, in order for it to even be palatable, requires a lot of work. I mean, like tens of thousands of dollars I've spent with flavor labs to get it to taste decently. So I'm toying with the idea of making it just pills, but the problem is then people will complain about having to take 15 pills a day or 17 pills a day. So it's kind of a no-win situation, but I am coming out with another flavor. It's still going to be sweetened, but only with monk fruit. So it's monk fruit and stevia. There's 0 sugar in it. And to get something to taste good, all those nasty tasting ingredients to taste good with no sugar added is, trust me when I tell you, it is a feat to have accomplished that. So to remove the sweetener, just going to get a lot of people complaining about how bad it tastes. Jody, what are your thoughts on drinking activated charcoal 1 tablespoon a day? Any benefits? I would only say in the context of if you're doing some kind of detoxification phase, or if you're dealing with like mold mycotoxins in your home, something to that effect. Those would be really the only contexts where I might use charcoal. Naomi, do you think fitness blender videos are a good resource? They mix Pilates, yoga, high intensity interval training, stretching, kickboxing, and traditional weights. For a base level of fitness, I might consider it. Like, if they're mixing all of those different things, I might just consider it something along the lines of cardio or endurance exercise rather than resistance exercise. So if your goal is to do that, if your goal is to do more endurance exercise, cardio, or high intensity interval training, or just establish some kind of base level of fitness, or you just love doing that kind of workout, by all means, but I wouldn't say it's a replacement for doing proper resistance exercise. Chris, what are your thoughts on Valter Longo's research? He suggests that anything beyond a 12 to 14 hour intermittent fasting window increases all-cause mortality. And for longevity, a pescatarian diet leaning heavy on the vegetarian portion with fish only a couple times per week is best. I know Alex has a lot of thoughts to share on Valter Longo's approach, so
I'll do my best to keep it brief. I don't know where the fasting for more than 12 to 14 hours relates to all-cause mortality. I don't know where that comes from.
I think it's probably like the skipping breakfast studies, like the studies linking skipping breakfast.
Yeah.
To
So
all-cause mortality.
big issue, I guess, with these types of conclusions is they're based on observational data that can be highly confounded by other factors. Clinically, when you look at fasting for anywhere from 12 to 16, possibly 18 hours, you see health benefits relative to not fasting as long. So from that standpoint, I don't see how it could contribute to all-cause mortality. As far as the pescatarian diet, I think that that's a great diet too. I think that in general, longevity research is very hard to tease out because you have certain idea frames that are put forth on what foods contribute and take away from longevity, but it's very difficult to separate those out from the other health habits of people that tend to consume those foods. I think that eating a heavily plant-based diet is vital for good health. I think that that's very hard to argue against when you look at the aggregate of research. So observational, clinical, as well as mechanistic explanations for these observed effects. However, I think that a plant-based diet does need to be sufficient in dietary protein for the reasons I talked about regarding sarcopenia. Because you start to enter into this realm of, oh, well, these diets that are very low in protein are related to extended lifespan. But that's based purely on observations of, for example, the blue zones, where the individuals have a healthy diet in general, combined with social interaction, community, a lot of low stress environments, a lot of other factors that play into it. And then you have actual clinical data and mechanistic explanation showing that not eating sufficient protein leads to sarcopenia, which is the leading cause of premature death. I think that the best middle ground is to eat a very plant-rich diet where you also obtain adequate protein, even if it's from plant sources.
Nice. Suchanda said, will you be sending the recording of this talk? Yes. I'm not so familiar with so many of these terms. I'm finding it confusing to keep up. Will it be possible to address each of the focus areas at the beginning of each webinar and have a focused question and answer session on each area rather than moving from topic to topic? We can only, it just wouldn't work out practically to do that, Suchanda. There's so many different topics that confining a specific Q&A session to one topic would just be very limiting and frustrating for a lot of people. If there's specific terms that you're finding difficulty with, just post in the Facebook group and say, what is whatever term, and you get a quick answer to it that way. Susan, when's the brain supplement available? It should be available by the end of next week, most likely. Tina, when you have the post-workout protein drink, is there an issue if you're having a regular breakfast protein drink? In other words, if fat in the form of almond milk and carbs, such as berries, inhibit muscle building?
It's fine. You're fine.
Okay. That's a good answer. I was trying to make sense of it. Thank you, Alex. Charla, what's your website, Brianna?
You can Brianna Thoreau, and that's kind of a mouthful. BRIANA 1N THEROUX.com.
Nice. Christine, would love to know what red light infrared flashlight you use and when do you use it? I have and love your red light infrared book. Let me find it. Alex, take the next question. In the meantime, I'll just go find this flashlight because I don't know the brand.
Okay. Patty, regarding red light therapy, I have a year-old knee replacement and benign tumors in the back of my knee due to a recently discovered rare disease. Any concerns with using red light therapy with these issues? I'll leave that one for you too, Ari, because you're the red light expert.
No, benign tumors, no concern. There's still a question around cancer, and there's Basically, to err on the side of caution when it comes to cancer, the short answer is there's positive research using red light therapy clearly in cancer patients, but you, in general, to err on the side of caution, want to avoid shining the light directly on the cancerous tumor. Having said that, there's even some research, and I've talked to Dr. Michael Hamblin about this, where he's not even really concerned about it at all for the most part. Maybe this has changed since I talked to him a year ago, but the gist of it is, I would say, to be 100% safe, use the red light, even if you have cancer, but shine it on parts of the body that you don't have it. Now, if you have benign tumors in the back of the knee, I really wouldn't worry about it at all. So that's the answer for that one. The flashlight, I just found this one. I actually I have a couple others, but I was kind of not super happy with them because the battery kind of dies on you and then the lights don't really work very well. This one is a brand called A-Home, and I got it off Amazon for I think like $30 or something like that. And it's really high quality and I'm impressed with it. Good power output. And the way that I use these is only for like spot treatments in specific issues. So for example, like let's say I had a, bicep strain or a hamstring strain or something, some specific point on the body that was injured, or I just smashed my forehead into the corner of a door the other night in the middle of the night when I took my dog out. And so like just using a spot treatment, just right on this part of my brow that I smashed into the door. This is just a really nice tool for those kind of spot treatments in a very small area of the body. Or the example that someone gave earlier when she smashed her head into the door, of like being able to push it right in between sort of the hair right against the skin. It's nice to get in there that way as well. Okay. Margaret, does apple cider vinegar before meals have any impact on fat loss? Alex.
There is some research showing that it can help with satiety. But outside of that, no. So if it doesn't help with satiety for you, then it's probably not going to benefit fat loss. But it is really, really good for blood glucose regulation. And so I personally try to make it a habit. Both of us make it a habit of having 1 to 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar before we eat a meal, just as a preventive means for good health. Nice.
Rosa is asking about the OCD book recommendations. Rosa, if you just post that in the Facebook group, it'll be easier that way. That way, people who are watching the replay can also get it. B, can we listen to the webinar again? Yes, the replay will be posted. Evelyn, supplements to support joint health while increasing weight in strength training.
I just answered this one. I think if this is the same Evelyn, you made a post about this in the group and I responded to it this morning. So
okay.
If not, then make another post and I can answer it again.
Yes. Excellent. Okay. Kathy, could you please repeat the OCD book you mentioned?
You just tag me in the post.
Okay.
Just make a post and tag Brianna.
Was it Imp of the Mind? Is that the one you mentioned?
Yeah, Imp of the Mind.
Okay. Okay. Almost done here. Jeannie, sorry if you've already answered this. I came late. I'm replacing a meal with a pea protein shake. I'm definitely eating meat on the other 2 meals and being sure to meet my goal of protein in each meal. My question, can I get away with a protein shake as a meal replacement in one meal? I would say yes is the quick answer to that.
Yeah, you can.
Christine, just for clarification, earthing grounding mats might be beneficial for some people and maybe not for others. I have a Dr. Mercola earthing grounding mat that seems to help, especially since it's not conducive to walk outside barefoot where I'm at. Yeah, I would say if you notice a clear beneficial effect from it, I have no fundamental problem with it. I've just seen a number of people report negative effects from it that make me just generally advise people not to go spend money on them. But if you already have one, you notice benefits, go for it. Jody, for Brianna, what about taking maca as a 50-year-old with fibroids?
Well, I like it, but it doesn't really balance hormones. There's no evidence to show that. It does increase libido. So you could take it for that, but I don't think it will help with your situation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, people, when they have an increase in sex drive, it's very common to think that it's because of changes in the hormonal environment, but it's not. It doesn't always have to be related to that. And so maca is great for boosting libido, but it has minimal effects on hormones.
Mary, if you eat sweet potatoes cold, is it resistant starch like white potatoes eaten cold?
No, because sweet potato, when you cook them, the starch gets broken down into maltose, which is a sugar. It's no longer starch, and that's why they're sweet. Potatoes, the starch structure is retained, and so the cooling has it form a more dense structure that makes it more difficult for your digestive enzymes to break down those starch molecules.
Mm-hmm. Dina said, Ari eats a lot of seafood. How do you deal with the possibilities of food being tainted with mercury and other heavy metal pollutants? So basically, through judicious choices of what specific seafood options I am consuming. So, for example, sardines and wild Alaskan salmon have very low levels of any heavy metals, including mercury. I do eat tuna once in a while as well, and I get Safe Catch tuna, which is tested for mercury. It's very low levels of mercury, and then there's specific species of tuna that have much higher or lower levels. So skipjack tuna is one of the best. There's a couple others that have much lower levels, like albacore and I think maybe yellowtail. There's a couple species that are very high and a couple that are low, but skipjack is one of the lowest. And then I eat like shellfish, so things like mussels and shrimp and I don't know what else, oysters and things like that. And I'm not really too worried about heavy metals from those. Jeremy, asking me, what do you eat with sardines to make them palatable? This is another one of those things that when I was young, I used to find totally disgusting and gross, kind of like the chicken feet. And now I actually like it and don't find it unpleasant at all. Some different kinds of dressings or sauces. I actually really like mustard, and just mustard with greens and sardines I find very pleasant and palatable. But any kind of like salad dressing, homemade salad dressing that's good quality, or sauce, something like mustard will work. Jody, I'm following the outline for me on the strength program. Is it okay to work out, strength train on rest days? I did yesterday's workout and feel like doing another different workout today. So just understand that it's no longer a rest day if you're training. So also make sure, like, just keep in mind that you want things to be sustainable over time. And the rest days are really important because your body does need rest if you're working out hard. So in the short term, in the context of like, should you work out today if you feel great and want to work out? Not a big deal. In the long term, over the span of weeks and months, if you're not taking rest days in between really hard training sessions, that can potentially lead to overtraining and problems via that. Okay, I think we're wrapping up here. Catherine, maybe when the most commonly asked questions are answered fully, those answers could be cut into clips and added to Q&A greatest hits. It's hard to get through these video replays without transcripts. Yeah, we maybe could do something like that. We could at least compile a text document with frequently asked questions. Angela said, just joined in from Australia. Good morning. Good morning, Angela. Did I hear correctly that vitamin A is good for dry skin?
Yes.
Mary, what are your thoughts on Zerona cold laser for fat reduction on the last stubborn fat areas? Yeah, I think it's perfectly good to do that. And there's some clinical research supporting that specific laser in weight loss. Michelle, not cutting out for me. There's a number. Interesting. So there's people saying that the feed is cutting out. Other people saying that it's not cutting out at all. Okay, so a couple people reporting that it was cutting out. Yeah, sorry guys, don't know how to explain that one. Why it would cut out for some people and not others. Michelle, how much does Energenesis cost? Depends on how many bottles you buy. One bottle is 119, 3 bottles or 5 bottles, it goes down to around 90 or 80-ish bucks per bottle. Just for reference to understand, this is not like a single ingredient. Well, I don't want to digress too much, but basically this is over 20 supplements in one. So if you were to go buy all of these individual supplements off Amazon, the cost would be about $350 or $400 for all of the same ingredients. So people are used to thinking, oh, a supplement should cost 20 bucks, 40 bucks, 50 bucks. Well, if you're taking 20 of those, $30 supplements and then putting them all in one bottle, well, now it's several $100s. So you just have to understand that's what Energenesis is. It's 20 in one, not one supplement that you should compare to some other $30 supplement. And I'll just tell you very bluntly and honestly, the insider look into the supplement industry, most people aim for like a 10 to 12 to 15 fold markup on their costs. So what supplement manufacturers do is their cost per bottle might be something like $2, $5, $7, $8, $10 per bottle. And then they mark it up like usually about 10 times what their cost is. So my costs for this are absurdly high. This is a premium supplement, and nobody formulates supplements like this because nobody wants to deal with costs that are anywhere close to this high. So my markup is tiny, and the cost of producing the supplements that I make is literally about 5 to 15 fold what most supplement manufacturers do. So it's a totally different way of doing things, and the result is premium products that are like 15 products in one, 20 products in one, all in one formula. So, and still getting it around $100 per bottle, which is amazingly cheap compared to if you were to get everything by itself. Christine has a comment for Alex. Alex is amazingly mature and thoughtful for someone only in their 20s. Wow. It's all a show, Christine. He's got an impressive facade, but I assure you he is nowhere near this intelligent or mature in real life. It's all just, I'm just kidding. No, I agree, Christine. Alex is awesome.
Christine, you should have actually, you should have met me when I first bumped into Brianna and Ari, 3 to 5 years ago, because it is something that you do learn over time. And I think the whole reason that Brianna took an interest with me and we became friends 5 years ago is because I was actually quite a dick to her, but I told her she was wrong straight to her face.
I like that though.
But she's like, I've never encountered anyone being this big of an honest jerk to me where they don't try to like soften anything. And so that's been one of my biggest challenges, is learning just how to communicate in a more palatable way, because my default preference is just, here it is. Like, I just throw it all at your face, and instead of kind of easing it towards you. So I'm happy that it's working.
Yes. And I agree with you, Christine. Alex is definitely unusually knowledgeable, intelligent, and mature for someone in their 20s, for anyone, really. I mean, let alone someone in their 20s. Amy, can you quantify the % contribution of each of the major variables for fat loss? For example, I'm going to guess nutrition 80%, circadian rhythm 10%, exercise and flux 5%, mindset and stress 5%. So I kind of answered this. We kind of answered this in an earlier question. There are scenarios where, especially for someone who, for example, you like understand that all of these percentages change dynamically over time. So let's say someone already has their nutrition dialed in pretty well. Like a lot of the people coming into this program are, for example, from Bright Line Eating, and they might already have their nutrition program dialed in 80%, 90% as good as it can be dialed in. So for them, in that context, then you start to realize, well, nutrition is no longer let's just take nutrition as a given. Now, what are the variables that are important to drive more fat loss from this point? And from that point, then, for example, flux and NEAT and exercise and circadian rhythm and mindset and stress might be 90% of the equation from that point on. So, these percentages change dynamically. They change according to the individual and what they have dialed in or not dialed in at any given time. And if you were going to say one thing is the most important thing to overall health and body composition, nutrition is unquestionably that. But I definitely would not agree with your percentages of like exercise and flux being 5%, for example. But do you guys want to add anything to that?
Yeah, no, I think you really answered it perfectly. I think the way to think about it is, look, if you just wanted to lose fat, you could stay up for weeks on end. Like, I mean, assuming you don't go psychotic, but you could get no sleep for a week. You could just sit in one spot and get no exercise, but you could also then not eat anything. And that dietary factor, not eating anything, would cause you to lose fat regardless of any other factor going on. But that's not healthy. That's not sustainable. Like exercise and flux, yeah, you don't need any of that to lose fat. You just need to reduce your calorie intake enough to make up for the low energy expenditure. But that's not healthy and it's not sustainable. Yeah. Same with circadian rhythm. Like getting your sleep in check, getting your circadian rhythm in check is going to make your body composition better. It's going to help better regulate your appetite. It's going to make life more enjoyable. But if we're going strictly based on is it necessary for fat loss? No, because I mean, there's a lot of bodybuilders out there that like don't even know what a circadian rhythm is, but they're just so obsessed with their diet and exercise that they can get down super lean. But it takes a lot of effort for them. Like they have to be super meticulous.
Yeah. The other thing I want to add to this that's really important to understand is they all matter and they all work together, and one in the absence of the others generally does not work. So let's say you're a bodybuilder and you aspire to grow huge amounts of muscles. Okay, well, what would happen if you just did tons of weight training, but you didn't take in enough food and enough protein? You wouldn't actually gain much muscle at all, and you'd end up overtrained and burned out and feeling like crap. So just that one component, even if you were to say like, oh, the weight training component is 80% of the equation. Okay, well, that 80% is great, but it doesn't mean anything and won't work to accomplish the goal in the absence of the other pieces being missing. So the same is true for fat loss. It's like, let's say you were trying to adhere to a diet, but you were super stressed and sleep deprived. Well, that stress and sleep deprivation, even if you were to say, hey, that's only 5% of the equation, if you were to quantify it in these sort of percentages, well, that 5% is enough to completely sabotage everything else you're doing if that's not taken care of. So they're all important. They all need to be part of the overall approach because they all make the other pieces work together, and they make the other pieces work, I should say. Kelly, does red light work for nerve pain? Yeah, there is some research showing that it works for nerve and neuropathic pain. Can Alex elaborate on the coffee enema downside? He said you have to be careful, but I didn't understand why. I was doing them every day to relieve or prevent menstrual migraines. As a nurse, I know how to perform the procedure.
Just be careful because of the caffeine content. The caffeine is contributing to the helping with the migraines, but it bypasses first pass metabolism in the liver, and so you're at a higher risk of toxicity. And so, I mean, that doesn't mean you're going to suffer toxic side effects. It's just saying that it's a greater potential. So you just want to be careful regarding what coffee you choose to use and the caffeine content in it.
And I think that electrolytes need to be watched too, because I mean, I've been in the alternative health world for years, and that is very common. And that's why the Gerson Institute adds potassium salts to the enema solution, because it's very common to throw your electrolytes off. And you're a nurse, so you know all this, but I just want you to pay attention to that too.
Mm-hmm. Michelle said sardines and avocado mashed is good too. Yes, indeed, I agree. It's great on if you eat any sort of bread. Having avocado and sardines on there is great as well, or even crackers. There's some there's a brand of crackers that I get called Mary's Gone crackers with all these seeds embedded into them and really good ingredients. And having like a little like avocado or hummus with sardines on there is excellent, very tasty. Also, Christine mentioned for people who are cutting in and out, probably slow internet connection on your end. That would be my best guess as well. Dina, radishes are super with sardines. Oh, lots of sardine tips here. And I agree with everyone else who wants to express appreciation for your thoughtfulness and generosity. Yeah, our pleasure. Tina, thanks for these webinars and for answering all our questions. You three are doing an awesome job. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. Rosa, what supplements or things can you do for fibromyalgia pain? There's some research. This is a complex topic, and I want to try and answer succinctly, but there's some research linking fibromyalgia pain to low serotonin levels. So things like tryptophan or 5-HTP supplements can potentially help. There's also links with fibromyalgia between specifically gut health issues and mitochondrial issues. And there's some indication, for example, that poor mitochondrial health can start to lead to more lactic acid production, and that may be a factor in the pain as well. So supplementing for mitochondrial health, so Energenesis is going to be a great choice. And anything for gut health and improving gut permeability. If I were to say like one specific ingredient, there's a number of gut healing supplements. So zinc, carnosine, herbs like slippery elm, and there's a few others that support gut healing. But probably the single supplement that I'm most impressed with is butyric acid and tributyrin in particular. There's pretty impressive research showing that it can help decrease gut permeability. So I might sort of look at things on all three of those fronts. How can you address the mitochondrial angle, the serotonin angle, the gut angle, all together, and supplement for all three of those things? What do you recommend? Barb saying, it sounds like, why do you recommend days off with Energenesis? Just certain herbal compounds are best to be cycled. And this is somewhat speculative because there's almost no research really testing this thoroughly. But I'll give you one example. So there's some research with St. John's wort tested in animals, looking at the production of glutathione and in response to using St. John's wort. And what's the specific phytochemical that's in St. John's wort? Do you guys know off the top of your head? I'm forgetting the
I don't.
really unique phytochemical, but there's a unique compound in there that St. John's wort ends up boosting glutathione levels. And what they showed in this study is that after 10 days of using the St. John's wort, during that 10-day process, glutathione levels went up. And then as they kept using the supplement, over the next 20 days to day 30, glutathione levels actually went all the way back down to baseline. So part of the idea, this is just one of just kind of looking at one aspect of things, one potential mechanism of the rationale behind cycling of different herbs, is you want to keep glutathione upregulated. So by going off for periods of time, you can potentially maintain that upregulated state of glutathione. Whereas if you were to use it all the time, every day, you potentially lose it. So it's still very speculative around that, but I personally do think that cycling on and off most herbal compounds is a good idea. I think that's close to it. Maybe there's another question. Marliese, Energenesis is great. Looking forward to the new product. Thank you. Christine, thank you for all your time today. I hope you know how much we appreciate all your thoughtfulness and your answers. Will the replays be posted in the Q&A section? Yes, they will. And you're welcome. Thank you. Tracy, Ari, do you eat wild salmon? Yes, wild Alaskan salmon is definitely a staple in my diet. And okay, last question that just came in. Cynthia said, when do you think your new product will come out? It's called Ultra Brains, coming out the end of next week. It's the first batch, literally just finished being bottled this past week, and it's en route shipping to the shipping and fulfillment house.
Hey, is that going to be a pill or a powder?
Pills. Yeah. It's a significant amount of pills. I think it's over the course of a day. So it's like 2 servings of 5 pills a day, or you could potentially take them all at once. But just to not have to deal with all of the headaches around Energenesis that I've had to deal with over the last year of people objecting to the taste or the sweetener, or, you know, not liking the mint and the chocolate mint flavor. You know, there's some segment of the population that will object to almost any conceivable taste or flavor that you can imagine. So it's been a tough task to try to please everybody on that front. So on the brain formula, I was like, I'm just going to skip it. People can deal with the pills. If they don't want to take that many pills, they can break open the pills and just put them in water and deal with bad taste then. Kelly said, what's the best time of day to take Energenesis? Morning or midday is the best. Jeremy said, thanks for staying on so long to answer all the questions. Our pleasure. Soraya, is Energenesis a multivitamin replacement? No, it's not, but there's a new supplement that's coming out in a few weeks. One of the other new supplements that we've been working on called Energy Essentials. And that one is a comprehensive multivitamin and mineral, plus a bunch of superfoods like spirulina, chlorella, pomegranate, cranberry, acai, maki berry, all kinds of things like that. And I think and Jeremy said the chocolate mint flavor was delicious. Thank you, Jeremy. I also find it delicious. But some people, there's a small segment of people that either don't like chocolate or mint. It's the way it goes. Everybody's got different perceptions of taste. Tracy, will we have 8 weeks of Q&As? Yes, you will. All right, guys. Well, this was a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. And Alex and Brianna, amazing job as always. Thank you guys for filling in sections where I don't know the answers. I think we make a great team where it seems like no matter what the question is, at least one of us knows the answer.
Yep.
So
100%.
Yeah. Awesome, guys. Well, enjoy the rest of your weekend. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, you too. Bye, everyone.
The next call is on Tuesday. So I will see you then, or potentially next Saturday. Have a great weekend.
Bye.